Chapter 1180. The light screen flashed. The situation inside the prison was clearly visible. Sha Tu was carrying Yang Xiao, who was badly burned by the vermilion bird divine flame, running wildly in the prison. Obviously, Sha Tu's physical strength was much stronger than that of the immortal generals of four-element beasts. In the prison where he could not fly and could only rely on his physical strength to run, Sha Tu's speed was at least 30% faster than that of the immortal generals who were chasing him. He carried Yang Xian on his back as he ran. He waved his big sword and slashed at the cells on both sides of the tunnel. The violent astral swords surged into the stone chamber, and all the prisoners who were imprisoned in the heavenly dungeon died horribly. They were imprisoned here, and more than 99% of their cultivation base had been sealed. They had no power to fight back at all. Wherever the sword went, no bones were left. All the spirits of the fairies were swallowed by Sha Tu's sword. Sha Tu's power was getting stronger. After going through 30 levels of the prison, Sha Tu's body was releasing a scary heat. Clearly, he had absorbed the spirits of the fairies. Even with his demon body of a world breaker, he could not digest the spirits in time. But Sha Tu was still slaughtering and devouring the essence energy of the immortal prisoners. Yang Xian suddenly let out a sharp howl. His left hand, which was still intact, stabbed heavily into Sha Tu's back. Sha Tu's body shook a little, and he kept running forward. His wild spirit became a purple-gold current that was visible to the naked eye. It went into Yang Xian's body. Yang Xian's badly damaged body quickly healed. Not long after, his body was back to normal. His power grew quickly. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yang Xian's power reached the peak of the Tao-breaking level. It seemed like he was going to break through the limit. The faces of the 6 Sky Kings changed. Yuanzhen Great Sky King screamed. He mobilized the 4 symbols 28 Star Kings and the Star Soldiers to enter the prison. They had to stop Sha Tu and Yang Xian from absorbing and improving. Otherwise, if they swallowed all the power of the prisoners in the prison, they would grow to the level of a Tao fusing level. When that happened, the Chaos Sky Formation would not be able to deal with them. The 4 Directions 4 Symbols 28 Constellation Lords were also veteran fighters of the Celestial Court. They were one of the most famous Celestial Lords. The 28 Constellation Lords are divided into 4 directions and 4 symbols: the Azure Dragon of the East, Horn, Kong, Root, Fang, Xin, Wei, Ji; the Black Tortoise of the North, Do, Niu, Nu, Su, Wei, Shi, Bai; the White Tiger of the West, Kuei, Lu, Wei, Wei, Shen; the Vermilion Bird of the South, Jing, Gui, Lu, Xing, Zhang, Yi, Zhen. Normally, these 28 constellations would only patrol around the Hall of Enlightenment. They could be considered the personal bodyguards of the 6 celestial emperors. They were related to the Azure Dragon, the White Tiger, the Vermilion Bird and the Black Tortoise, the 4 great Sir Gods, but in reality, they were not on the same side. The 4 divine monarchs themselves inherited the power of the 4 sacred beasts, while the 28 constellation stars corresponded to the 4 sacred beasts. The source of their power was the star power, which could condense the true form of the 4 sacred beasts in the formation, rather than the power of the sacred beasts themselves. If the 4 divine monarchs and the 28 constellations attacked together, the 28 constellation lords would form the 4 sacred stars demon subduing formation. With the 4 divine monarchs presiding over the formation and the generals of the 4 divine monarchs supporting them from the outside, the power of this formation would be enough to rank in the top 5 among the main killing formations of the Celestial Court. At the order of Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Yan, the 28 constellation lords immediately led hundreds of star soldiers and rushed into the prison. In just a few breaths of time, 4 streams of immortal energy shot over from afar. The 4-element divine monarchs had just condensed their divine bodies in the deification pool. They did not even greet the 6 celestial emperors, but angrily followed the 28 constellations into the prison. Before long, the 4-element divine generals who had just been killed also rushed over. They gritted their teeth, grabbed their weapons, and rushed into the prison, roaring all the way to Sha Tu and Yang Xian. The two sides soon met on the 21st floor of the prison. As soon as the 28 Constellation Lords saw Sha Tu and Yang Xian, without saying a word, they directly guided their natal star power. In the void, the 6 celestial emperors kept chanting incantations. Some of the restrictive spells over the prison were opened, and the natal star power of the 28 Constellation Lords rushed into the prison without any hindrance and quickly poured into their bodies. As soon as the star power entered their bodies, the bodies of the 28 Constellation Lords immediately changed, changing from human form to 28 strange divine beasts. Accompanied by the deafening roar of the beasts, the void around Sha Tu and Yang Xian was firmly sealed by the 28 Constellation Lords and their star soldiers. The 4-element divine monarchs immediately rushed into the formation. They occupied the positions of the 4 sacred beasts, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise, respectively, and guided the mighty star power in the formation into their bodies. As soon as the star power driven by the 28 Constellation Lords entered the body of the 4-element divine monarchs and merged with the power of the sacred beasts, a strange change immediately took place. With a long roar from Black Tortoise, a circle of yellow light quickly spread around. The prison corridor, which was originally only 100 feet high and 1,000 feet wide, immediately became 100 miles high and 1,000 miles wide. The huge space was enough for a group of people to fight to their heart's content. Then came the Azure Dragon Divine Monarch's dragon roar. Boundless green trees rustled up, and green smoke billowed in them. Countless thunderbolts turned into electric dragons as thick as water tanks, rolling and jumping in the green forest. The electricity flowed everywhere, and everyone's hair fluttered in the air. Occasionally, their hair would flutter in the air, immediately bringing with it a large number of flowing electric arcs. White Tiger had transformed into a huge winged saber-toothed tiger. He slowly wandered in the formation, with dozens of strange-shaped swords looming around him. Sharp white gunmetal sword chi tore through the void. The space of the prison of the Celestial Court was reinforced by countless restrictive spells. Even so, the space here was still torn by countless extremely thin black cracks by the sword chi. Sharp whistling sounds of wind could be heard coming from the cracks that could be born and destroyed at any time, bringing with them a cold and dangerous aura. The Vermilion Bird Divine Monarch was the most irascible of them all. Just now, she had also died the most aggrieved, and she was even angered by Yang Xian's filthy words. Therefore, as soon as the formation was formed, she immediately filled her body with the power of the stars. Before long, she transformed into a vermilion bird with a wingspan of thousands of feet and a body covered in blue flames. 9 long and thin golden feathers stood up on her head like a crown. The Vermilion Bird Divine Monarch threw her head back and roared proudly. The vermilion bird dazzling halo shot out of her mouth, stirring up a large sheet of white, almost transparent flame that swept towards Sha Tu and Yang Xian. This time, Vermilion Bird Divine Lord used all of her Dharma powers. The flames that the vermilion bird dazzling halo spat out were extremely hot, enough to melt everything. The white, almost transparent, terrifying divine flames turned into countless palm-sized vermilion birds under the control of her divine consciousness. The vermilion birds charged at Sha Tu and Yang Xian from all directions with an aura of death. Sha Tu and Yang Xian sneered at the same time. Sha Tu completely ignored the oncoming flame. He raised his sword and took a big step forward, swinging his sword at White Tiger Divine Monarch's head in a head-on clash. White Tiger Divine Monarch gave a long roar and flapped his huge wings. He transformed into a beam of white light and smashed forward with a formidable sword energy around him. Yang Xian ignored the Vermilion Bird Divine Monarch's flame as well. He stretched his arms and stirred up a black tornado around him. Countless sharp thorns gleaming coldly swept out of the tornado, piercing towards Blue Dragon Divine Monarch with a faint pink mist. Divine Lord Black Tortoise roared. The tortoise-shell shadow behind him became more than 10 times thicker and clearer than it had been in the previous battle. He curled up and stood in front of Yang Xian, blocking the storm-like attacks for Divine Lord Azure Dragon. Blue Dragon Divine Monarch transformed into a several miles long green divine dragon. Green mist rose from the surrounding woods and kept flowing into the bodies of White Tiger, Black Tortoise, and Vermilion Bird Divine Monarch, quickly replenishing their strength and magic power. At the same time, a lot of green mist melted into Red Bird Divine Monarch's fire birds. It made the fire birds' temperature increase by a few times, and the fire birds' flying speed increased tenfold. Everyone moved at the same time, but the first to clash were White Tiger Divine Monarch and Sha Tuesday. They were both very fast, and they were only 30 feet away from each other in the blink of an eye. Sha Tu's long sword was going to strike White Tiger Divine Monarch's sword energy. Suddenly, Sha Tu's chest armor split to the left and right. A twisted black shadow came out. Sha Tu's body moved to the side, and his long sword slashed Blue Dragon Divine Monarch's neck. No one expected Sha Tu to have a skill like that. No one expected Sha Tu's breastplate to hide another break world being inside. No one expected Sha Tu to face White Tiger Divine Monarch's attack and sneak up on Blue Dragon Divine Monarch. As the long sword slashed down, Divine Lord Azure Dragon let out an incomparably sullen roar. His dragon head was severed by the sword, and his original spirit floated up again. Black Tortoise and Vermilion Bird were shocked. A crack suddenly appeared on Yang Xian's skull, and another twisted shadow shot out. While Yang Jian was laughing, the shadow became a very thin black light. It went straight through Red Bird Divine Monarch's heart. Red Bird Divine Monarch used all his power to control the fire birds. He could not stop the shadow's attack. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird let out a sad cry and his huge body exploded into a ball of flames. Instantly, there was a huge hole in the formation that the 28 constellations had formed. The sky was full of fire birds. The formation was on the verge of breaking. The White Tiger and the Black Tortoise were shocked. Before they could react, they were attacked by 4 Break World people from the front and back. After consuming so many Sky Prison prisoners, the 4 World Breakers were much stronger than they were. The 4 of them attacked together. White Tiger and the Black Tortoise roared. Their god bodies were destroyed. Yuanling had no choice but to return to the deified pool. Sha Tu laughed like crazy. He raised his long sword and screamed. He went for the 28 Star Kings, who were frozen. Sword light flew all over the sky, and Sha Tu left countless shadows in the void. None of the 28 constellations, their star soldiers, and the 4 divine beasts who had just arrived were his match. Hundreds of people had their divine bodies slain by him, and all their original spirits had fled back to the deification pool. The 4 world breakers laughed at the same time. They madly rushed to the cells far away. They worked together to consume the fairies in the cells. The complexions of the 6 celestial emperors were extremely unsightly, as if ink could drip out of every pore. The 18 sect masters' faces were also extremely gloomy. Lightning flickered under their faces, and thunder seemed to be rumbling in their eyes. Yuanzhen Great Sky King took a deep breath. He pulled out a fairy sword and pointed it at the sky. If I let these monsters leave Sky Prison alive, I will not be able to be a Sky King. The long sword slashed down. Yuanzhen Great Sky King's left hand had a deep wound. Gold blood sprayed out. The sky full of god soldiers and sky generals roared as Chi-Chi roared. Everyone's eyes turned red. Yuanzhen Great Sky King had been forced to say something like that. They had to fight for their lives. Big Dipper, South Dipper, 7 planets, 9 core, and the other star kings led their star soldiers into Sky Prison. Chapter 1181. Adding fuel to the fire, how unwise. As the 6 celestial emperors kept sending soldiers to fill the prison, Lord Xianqing sneered disapprovingly. In the past, in the East Sea, the vast army of the East Sea was under Lord Xianqing's command, and he was very talented in military formations. In his opinion, since there were 4 realm breakers in the prison, he might as well use the strongest restrictive spells to destroy the prison, all the prisoners, and destroy the prison. The best way to deal with them was to destroy the prison and suppress the 4 realm breakers. It was useless to slowly send 30 to 50 celestial lords to fight the realm breakers. While Lord Xianqing was attacking the 6 celestial emperors, the Big Dipper, the South Dipper, the 7 luminaries, the 9 pivots, and the other celestial lords had been defeated. Hundreds of yuanlings shot up into the sky and headed toward the deification pool. The four realm breakers laughed strangely and stirred up a bloody storm in the prison, crazily devouring the spirits of all the prisoners and jailers. The 6 celestial emperors kept sending soldiers into the prison to suppress them, but none of the celestial lords and celestial lords were the opponents of these realm breakers. Their divine bodies were all destroyed, and they fled back to the deification pool to reform their divine bodies. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. The 6 celestial emperors had made a mistake. As Lord Xiansheng had said, they were using the tactic of adding oil to deal with the realm breakers, which was to create opportunities for them to grow stronger. There were so many prisoners in the prison, which was enough for the 4 realm breakers to reach the realm of path fusing, or even the peak of it. With the current power of the celestial court, could they deal with 4 peak path fusing experts? If the 6 celestial emperors were determined to destroy the prison and sacrifice all the prisoners to prevent the 4 realm breakers from absorbing any spirit energy, they would not have been able to grow to where they were now. At that time, the great array of heaven would surround them, and the 4 realm breakers, who had not yet recovered their strength, would be completely suppressed. Being trapped in the great array of heaven, no matter how many divine soldiers and generals they killed, they were just bodies formed by the power of the great path. There was no spirit energy for the realm breakers to absorb. No matter how many they killed, their strength would only become weaker and weaker. They would not be strengthened at all. Under the siege of the Chaos Sky Formation, the 4 break world people would be suppressed. It was unknown how many Sky Prison prisoners' spirits had been consumed by the 4 break world breakers. Now, it was like they had been injected with chicken blood. The more they fought, the stronger they became. They were going to break out of Sky Prison. Their presence was already at the same level as the 7 Buddhas and 9 paths. Idiots, Wu Qi sneered and shook his head. Years of cultivation have turned them into idiots. The group of people mocked the 6 celestial emperors, the many divine lords and heavenly monarchs. The 5 righteous gods who had set up the 5 elements grand formation looked at each other, speechless. 2 beams of light shot out from Wu Qi's eyes. He carefully looked in the direction of the prison and cried out in surprise. The 4 world breakers were getting stronger. It was not just because they were consuming the prisoners. There was also a black, bloody, murderous, nameless power that kept going into their bodies. The source of the black aura, which looked like a venomous python, seemed to be pouring directly from the surrounding void. Surprised and bewildered, Wu Qi hurriedly opened his eyes and looked around Panga continent. There was nothing unusual in the celestial court. The divine soldiers and generals that had been lost could be reformed with the deification pool, which meant that they had not suffered any losses. There was nothing unusual in the human realm upon heavens. With the Huang clan and so many Dao fusing experts guarding the place, the world breakers would not be stupid enough to provoke them now. The Dao Ocean people were the same. The 16 auras that made the thievery energy drool were still there. Apart from that, the Dao Ocean people were as quiet as ghosts. There was nothing unusual in the outer heavenly realms. The mortals on various planets lived and worked in peace. They had no idea what had happened in the celestial court. Mount Grizzly Vulture was still shrouded in the light of Buddha. Countless eminent monks were happily chanting and cultivating. It was a pure land of Buddhism. But when Wu Qi looked down at Panga continent, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. It seemed to be quiet, and there was nothing unusual, but the source of the black aura was here. Moreover, the aura was mainly coming from the southern region, but there did not seem to be anything unusual there. Apart from the fact that some cities and surrounding villages and towns seemed to be uninhabited, everything else was normal. That was the reason why Wu Qi's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Some of the cities measured hundreds of miles in length and width, and were inhabited by at least 10 million people. But why was there not a single pedestrian in broad daylight? The nearby mountains and hills were emitting beams of auspicious light that enveloped the land. Even the ordinary Dharma eyes of the celestial court could not see through the restrictive spells unleashed by these mountain gods and earth veins. But Wu Qi's cultivation base was so strong, and his Dharma eye's divine ability was extraordinary. How could these restrictive spells hide from him? That was why he discovered the strangeness of those cities and towns. If he was not mistaken, all the mortals in these cities and towns had been slaughtered, and those mountain gods and earth gods were working with the killers to conceal the heavenly secret. Although those mountain gods and earth gods were the lowest among the Aeon deities, they had real power after all. They had mobilized the natural energy in Panga continent's underground veins and jointly laid out restrictive spells that could block 99% of the heavenly gods of the celestial court from peeping on Panga continent. Since the apotheosis, heaven and earth had formed a system of its own. Heavenly gods and earth gods only had the right to supervise each other, but no actual power of command. For example, the 6 celestial emperors could not directly give orders to the mountain gods and earth gods in the lower realm, and had to rely on leaders like the great emperors of the 3 mountains to mobilize the Aeon deities in the lower realm. In this way, if anything happened to the Aeon deities in the lower realm, the celestial court would be caught off guard. Damn it! Are the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs all muddled in the head? They have been apotheosized, but they have completely ignored human nature. Wu Qi stamped his foot. It was clear that the lower-grade mountain gods and earth gods in the lower realm had made a big mistake. Almost all the mountain gods and earth gods in the southern region of Panga continent were working together to deceive their superiors. But, could the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs be blamed for this? They had never been human, so how could they have any human nature? Wu Qi would never forget the legacy he had obtained in the 7 sacred palaces. The breakers were destructive machines created by the End, using the negative energy of the sacred realm, and their power came from killing and destruction. Every time a living being died on Panga continent, the power of the breakers would increase. By slaughtering the human race on Panga continent so wantonly, especially when the human race was the possessor of the heavenly Tao, the breakers would gain more power by slaughtering them. But, how did they do it? How did they convince those mountain gods and earth gods? Before Wu Qi could figure out the problem, he suddenly sensed the whole void of Panga world trembling. He hurriedly looked up at the boundless sky. The stars were twinkling in the void, and all the stars were rotating according to their positions. The heavenly Tao formation was clearly visible in Wu Qi's eyes, but a shadow in the shape of a 9-headed serpent was slowly invading it. The shadow was slowly wriggling, carefully eroding the formation. The heavenly Tao was determined by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs according to the laws of Panga world's heavenly Tao. If the shadow in the shape of a 9-headed serpent invaded the formation, it would be equivalent to it beginning to invade the laws of the entire Panga world. The so-called immortal experts of Tao fusing realm were nothing more than their Yuan Ling, who had merged with the heavenly Tao. Therefore, as long as the heavenly Tao did not destroy their Yuan Ling, they would not die. But, if the shadow really invaded the heavenly Tao of Panga world, the immortal experts of Tao fusing realm, Yuan Ling, would be found by it sooner or later, and eventually killed one by one in the vast heavenly Tao. If Yuan Ling was killed, all the Tao fusing realm experts would be killed. Except for Wu Qi, whose eyes had been purified by the holy power, no one had discovered the existence of the 9-headed serpent. This fellow must be one of the breakers, and he was using his own secret fiend technique to wipe out the strongest group of experts of Panga world from the root. Just like the sky-pilfering formation that Wu Qi had prepared, these world breakers had also targeted the foundation of Panga world. They attacked the strongest and weakest point of Panga world. Ao Buzan, Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, Yuan Qing, Tu Xiaobai, you will command the gods of the 5 tribes, and lead all the divine soldiers and heavenly generals down to the lower realm to carefully investigate what has happened in the southern region of Panga continent. Ao Buzan, you know what to do. Wu Qi punched Ao Buzan hard in the chest and said, I don't care who is slaughtering people there, I want you to kill him. With a wave of his hand, Wu Qi threw out Wu Chang, whose divine soul was imprisoned, and 8,000 soldiers of the undead army. Take this group of fearless fools with you, he cried out, and let them fight whoever is difficult to deal with. I'd like to see if this army of undead is really immortal. Ao Buzan and Lord Xianqing stared at the lower realm with their eyes wide open at the same time. But, the southern region of Pangu continent was shrouded in fog, and the sky above the cities was filled with a strong mortal dust and turbid air, which blocked their sight and prevented them from seeing what was happening. But, since Wu Qi had said so, he must have his reasons. Without further ado, they called out to each other and rushed down to the lower realm with the 5 righteous deities. The 5 righteous deities were a little reluctant. They really did not want to leave the celestial court and go down to the lower realm. But, Wu Qi just glanced at them coldly. The 5 righteous deities shuddered at the same time, then quickly summoned all their subordinates and rushed down to the lower realm. Zi Xian, Yi Xia, take gold horn, silver horn, gold feather, and silver feather to the prison. Keep those 4 realm breakers busy, and don't let them get out of here easily. If you can suppress them, then suppress them completely. Be careful, and don't let me be sad. Wu Qi gave Princess Xianglu and Yi Xia a big hug. The 2 girls did not stand on ceremony, and they hurried to the prison in beams of light. Wu Qi looked up at the 9-headed serpent that was looming in the endless void, then brought Supremacy Dei and Reverend Shouzhua into the void at the same time. Fools of the celestial court, do you really think you can sit back and relax? I'm afraid you will be killed even before the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs come out of seclusion. Wu Qi cursed the higher-ups of the celestial court angrily as he rushed into the void at his fastest speed. Chapter 1182. In the void, 2 flickering, paper-thin shadows were constantly appearing, like will-o'-the-wisps in a graveyard in the middle of the night, giving off a gloomy feeling. Beneath their feet was that gargantuan 9-headed serpent, whose head covered an area of tens of thousands of star regions and could envelop billions of stars. Such a huge python was constantly wriggling, slowly seeping into the void. A deep hissing noise could be heard. Occasionally, the serpent's tail swept across the air, and any stars swept across by that faint tail would disappear without a trace. It did not matter if it was a star or a planet. It did not matter if it was a star or a planet. It did not matter if it was a cultivator or a normal person on a planet. Every other creature disappeared. All traces of their existence were erased. It was like they had never existed in the first place. The 2 twisted black shadows laughed weirdly. One of the black shadows suddenly laughed and said, "You Ju, hurry up. Infect this world's rules. Then, we can destroy this place. End is about to wake up. We just need to destroy this world. When the world breaks, the death power will spread. That will be enough to wake up End." The other black shadow quietly shouted, "You Ju, after sleeping for so many years, did it make you stupid? Back then, you only used a few days to infect the holy world's sky rules. Is this small world harder to deal with than the holy world?" The 2 black shadows shouted at the same time, 7 days. I will give you 7 days. You need to control the rules of this world. The 9-headed snake suddenly stopped moving. An unpredictable voice sounded from all directions. Shut your mouths. This world is very small. It is very weak. It is only a trillionth of the size of the holy world. But in this damn world, do you know how complicated its sky rules are? The 9-headed snake, Yu Ju, was the weakest of the 13 world breakers, but he was the most dangerous to the world. He kept complaining. Back then, it only took him a few days to infect the sky rules of the holy world. That was because the sky rules of the holy world were as big as Chi-Chi's. Every single rule was in its place, like a pile of bricks in Chi-Chi's world. Invading the laws of the saints' world was a delightful matter. There was no need for him to think at all. He just needed to follow the flow of the laws and gradually devour them, and he would be able to comprehend all the laws of the saints' world very quickly. At the same time, he would fuse his presence with the laws of the saints' world and drastically weaken the power of the experts. But the sky rules of Pan-Gu world made Yu Ju want to vomit blood. The natural rules of Pan-Gu world were complicated. They included almost all the natural rules that existed in the holy world. However, the laws of the saints' world were so neat and orderly. All the laws, from low to high, were arranged in a perfect pattern. Only this damned Pan-gu world was like an irresponsible construction worker who poured all building materials into a giant pit and mixed them up. That was fine. Pan-gu, the creator of this world, was irresponsible. But aside from Pan-gu world had gone through countless catastrophes. Those Tao-fusing warriors filled the pit with sand, mud, and cement. They mixed it with glue and stirred it up many times. Every time a Tao-fusing warrior disturbed the natural rules of Pan-gu world would be messed up. After so many catastrophes, after so many battles, even if Pan-gu did it himself, he would not be able to straighten out the natural rules. What enraged Yu the most was that the great Tao of Pan-gu world was not only disordered, but also, 90% of the great Tao of Pan-gu world was incomplete. For example, the most basic 5 elements of natural rules had parts missing here and there. They were all entangled with each other, which was incomprehensible. But all the natural rules of the holy world were complete and perfect. One natural rule could easily infect the other natural rules that were related to it. But what about Pan-gu world? If you followed the law of earth and advanced towards the law of wood, suddenly, the laws of metal, fire, and water would appear and cause trouble. Then, the laws of wind, thunder, ice, snow, and other laws would appear and cause trouble. Then, the laws of wind, thunder, ice, and snow would appear. The narrow path was full of traps. How could Yu infect these damn natural rules? Yu felt wronged. Why was this small world so strange? His other 2 companions only gave him 7 days. Heavens, it would be good if he could understand the natural rules of the 5 elements in 7 days, not to mention the other complicated and messy things. Yu complained to his 2 companions. The 2 shadows flashed faster and faster. They sighed together. Why was this small Pan-gu world so strange? Sighing, one of the shadows murmured, "Then, do your best. Try to destroy this world in 3 months." Since there was such a world in the ruins of the holy world, it was hard to say if there were other similar worlds. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The 3 world breakers sighed at the same time. Yuju's body began to move slowly again. His body released a black mist that spread out in all directions. Around him, swirls of 5-colored light were faintly visible. The black mist seeped into the 5-colored light. Some of the light had a slight layer of black on it. Wu Qi and his 2 clones rushed up into the sky at the same time. Without saying a word, the 3 of them struck out their strongest attacks at the 2 shadows. In the 7 Holy Palace, Wu Qi had received many benefits. Among them were some medicinal pills left behind by the 7 saints who had created the 7 Holy Palace. De Yizun and Shouzhua had taken some medicinal pills. With Wu Qi's help, the 2 clones had stepped into the Genesis level. After all, they were his clones. It was much easier for him to improve their powers than Princess Zhanglu and the others. The 3 Genesis level experts attacked at the same time. A vast holy power came out of their hands. It became 3 purple gold lightning bolts that roared. The lightning bolts were like giant dragons flying through the sky. The 3 lightning bolts suddenly combined into one. They became a mad purple dragon that roared with thunder. The 2 shadows were caught off guard. They were swallowed by the mad purple dragon. An infinite amount of lightning exploded, and the 2 shadows were blown to pieces. Yu screamed, "Be careful. These 3 must be the strongest Tao fusion level saints in this world. Before I infect the heavenly Tao and kill their primordial spirits, they are immortal." Countless black lights flashed in the sky and quickly formed into 2 shadows. A blurry light flashed, and the 2 shadows revealed themselves. Both of them were beautiful young girls. Both of them were expressionless, but their eyes were filled with a deep sense of death. Of the 2 girls in black robes, the one on the left was holding a pitch-black human skull, while the one on the right had 2 fiercely beating blood-red hearts floating beside her. "I am He Gu." The girl on the left sneered and said, "You are very strong, but it's a pity that you are doomed to fall." "I am Qi Yen." The girl on the right stared at Wu Qi with an infatuated look. The corner of her mouth drooped slightly into a cold smile as she sighed and said in a low voice, "Your overall strength is so strong, so your hearts must be very delicious, right?" In Wu Qi's eyes, countless black lights were constantly fusing into the bodies of the two girls. Clearly, the scale of the killing on Panga continent was getting larger and larger. As the killing aura grew, the cultivation bases of the world breakers were also getting stronger. The overall strength of the two girls in front of him had definitely reached the level of Tao fusion, and as long as the immortal soul seals were not destroyed, they would never fall. They really had all the power and characteristics that Tao fusion experts should have. Just as Wu Qi was lost in thought, Qi Yan giggled, and the two hearts floating beside her began to beat rapidly. The hearts of Wu Qi, Supremacy Dei, and esteemed Shou Zhuo beat violently, and the blood in their bodies flowed wildly in their veins uncontrollably. Their eyeballs were squeezed out of their sockets by the violent blood and almost popped out of their sockets. "Damn it!" Wu Qi gave a deep growl. The heaven-refining cauldron whistled out and unleashed a large sheet of flame that enveloped the three of them. The speed of their blood flow slowed down a little, and then esteemed Shou Zhuo produced the cosmic star-fixing pagoda. The pagoda was a supreme artifact of primal that Wu Qi had crafted with the white lotus of great purity, and it had a very strong defense. However, as soon as the pagoda appeared, Yu Ju's huge tail swept over casually. With a loud bang, the Yuan Ling true flame released by the heaven-refining cauldron was broken, and the cosmic star-fixing pagoda was smashed into countless pieces. Black Skeleton and Qi Yan laughed strangely at the same time. The eyes of the skull in Black Skeleton's hands spewed out two streams of black gas that fixed on the top of Wu Qi's head. She sneered and said, "This cauldron is fine, it has the aura of a sacred artifact of the holy world in the past, but this pagoda, what kind of rubbish is this?" Two streams of black gas passed through the Yuan Ling true flame and shot onto the top of Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi felt his divine soul sink, and even his thoughts almost stagnated. Countless shrill ghost howls rang in his ears, and those howls almost tore Wu Qi's divine soul into pieces. The heaven-refining cauldron made an angry roar. The flames became a giant dragon that went after Black Skeleton and Qi Yan. The two world breakers were prepared. They both fell back. Yu Ju's body spewed out a sticky black gas. A giant nine-headed snake that was 100 miles long emerged from the black gas. Black Skeleton and Qi Yan stood on the middle head of the nine-headed snake. Their eyes shone with a cold light that could steal souls. The fire dragon hit the nine-headed snake's body and burned a hole that was a mile wide. But the black gas kept coming. The hole that had been burned instantly returned to normal. At the same time, a plume of dark smoke followed the fire dragon and went straight toward him, smashing viciously into the cauldron. A catch-a noise was heard. The heaven-refining cauldron, which had been refined a dozen times, had a very small crack. Wu Qi spat out a mouthful of blood. He shouted and waved his sleeves. Countless beams of gold light shot down like shooting stars. Wu Qi and his two clones flew toward the Daoyu Ocean. 7 Buddhas, 9 paths, world breakers have begun to pollute the path of heaven. If you don't come out and fight, when will you? Wu Qi shouted. His loud voice echoed through the entire Pangu world. He wanted to drag the 7 Buddhas and the 9 paths into this mess. Otherwise, how could he get the 16 streams of power that made him so anxious? Chapter 1183. Sky Prison. Sha Tu and the other 3 world breakers finally made it out of Sky Prison. The Star Lords who went to suppress them were defeated by more than 1,000 waves. There were nearly 100,000 people. The 100,000 Star Lords were defeated. The prisoners in Sky Prison were eaten by the 4 of them. At this moment, the 4 of them had their powers inflated to a frightening level. They had just run out of the Sky Prison's door when Sha Tu unleashed his killing aura. The hall that was used to suppress the prison door was smashed. Although tens of thousands of 4-element god soldiers had star power to protect them, the incredibly strong killing aura still broke their god bodies. If their Yuanling had not been protected by the sky path, the 4-element god soldiers would have died a long time ago. Even so, When tens of thousands of god soldiers suddenly died, the four-element god king's formation had a big hole. The four world breakers jumped into the big formation. Sha Tu's sword light was like rain. Yang Ming's arms were flying fast. The other two world breakers casually attacked, and black thunder was like a tide. Inside the thunder, there were countless twisted shadows that were like poisonous insects and beasts. The millions of four-element god kings god soldiers immediately collapsed. The big formation suddenly broke. The power of the backlash made the tens of thousands of Star Lords Chi-Chi, who were chanting spells in space, cough up blood. Seeing the four world breakers rush out, the 6 Sky Kings were shocked. They waved their hands and shouted. They ordered the Star Lords and God Lords to suppress the 4 of them. But now, they were not facing the weak world breakers. Instead, they were facing 4 mad demons who were at the peak of the path integration realm. The 6 Sky Kings shouted in the sky. The 4 world breakers used their god wills to lock them down. Sha Tu's body flashed. He tore space and went next to the 6 Sky Kings. He swung his big sword, and 6 heads flew into the sky. The 6 Sky Kings Yuan Ling angrily roared and ran away. They were running toward the deification pool. The 18 sect masters standing next to the celestial emperors were startled. Simultaneously, they activated their defensive treasures and subconsciously fled into the distance. These leaders were different from the holiness of the celestial court. These leaders had the gold bodies of fairies. The 4 world breakers could not get any benefits from the holy bodies of the celestial court, but the 18 big leaders were like medicine to the world breakers. Consuming any one of them could increase their power by a lot. They ran fast, but the 4 world breakers chased them even faster. 2 black shadows flashed across the sky and abruptly appeared above the head of primogenitor Qingling, the great hierarch of Yuanji sect, who was fleeing at full speed. The 2 black shadows suddenly sprayed out countless black gas, and their figures were finally revealed from the black gas. They were 2 bewitching young men. One had dark skin, and the other had pale skin. The black-skinned man had a pair of snow-white wings on his back, while the green-skinned man had a pair of shiny black wings on his back. The 2 of them hooked their legs together. Their wings flapped fast, and their bodies spun in space. Both of them were covered in a layer of black flames that seemed to contain all of the filth of time, and a white demonic flame that seemed to contain everything in its path, and a white demonic flame that seemed to contain everything in its path, giving off a strong sense of death. Above primogenitor Qingling's head was a 3-tiered hexagonal blue pagoda. Each corner of the pagoda had a spirit orb that was the size of a thumb. It kept releasing a blinding light that swept in all directions. Wherever the 300 feet long streak of light passed, even the void was torn into countless cracks. But the 2 world breakers just laughed weirdly. They were like whirlwinds above primogenitor Qingling's head. Their hands rolled up the black and white demon fire and slammed it down. There was a loud bang and countless glaring cracks appeared on the pagoda. Qingling Taoist Lord of Virtue let out a miserable cry and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body suddenly exploded and turned into countless purple streamers that flew in all directions. However, the black and white whirlwinds swept in from all directions and forcefully restrained the escaping purple streamers, instantly reforming the body of Qingling Taoist Lord of Virtue. 4 arms plunged into the body of primogenitor Qingling. The dignified Taoist hierarch, whose cultivation was close to the peak of the first level of the Tao-breaking state, could only let out a short and shrill cry before he was sucked dry by the black and white flames. In front of the countless holy people of the celestial court, the Taoist sect leader's body turned into quicksand. His soul was gone, and he died. The black-skinned, white-winged young man laughed evilly. He raised his right hand and said, "White lizard." The white-skinned, black-clothed young man laughed as well. He squinted his eyes, raised his hands, and said excitedly, "What a delicious taste. I am Hell Lizard." The 2 of them laughed wildly, then turned into black and white whirlwinds and swept around. Wherever Hell Lizard went, the bodies of countless divine soldiers became filthy. In just a few breaths of time, their bodies were like metals that had been corroded by sulfuric acid for hundreds of years. They were ragged and covered in all kinds of abscesses. Everything in its path was reduced to nothingness, and the white flames devoured everything. Whether it was weapons or armors, or the divine soldiers and generals themselves, they all melted in the white flames. Sha Tu raised his sword and rushed into the formation. With his Tao-fusing cultivation, he swung his sword left and right. Sword energy swept across 3,000 miles. With a casual wave of his hand, a bloody path was created. Meanwhile, Yang Xian went to the female celestial lords and divine emperors. Laughing and laughing, he slaughtered all the male divine soldiers around them, then quickly waved his hands and tore their armors to pieces. The Taoist sect leader had fled, the 6 celestial emperors had been beheaded, and they did not have time to reform their divine bodies. Without a commander, the formation of great chaos was thrown into chaos. The 1,080,000 celestial lords fought on their own, and the righteous deities did not listen to each other. There were also other divine generals, divine lords, and heavenly lords who acted recklessly according to their own temperament. Some ran here, while others ran there. The people in the formation came and went as if they were going to a market. The number 1 killing formation of the heaven was completely destroyed before it could do anything. White lizard and hell lizard laughed wildly. Suddenly, their bodies disintegrated and turned into countless black and white mosquito-like flying insects with extremely long mouthparts. There were at least billions of them, and they swept across the land like dark clouds. Wherever they went, divine soldiers and heavenly generals fell one after another. Sha Tu cast a divine ability and turned into a 100,000 miles tall giant. The long sword in his hand became a few 100,000 miles long. The big long sword did not need any god power to move. With a gentle wave, countless divine soldiers and divine generals were smashed into meat paste. Yang Xian turned into a pink mist and ran around. Wherever he went, all the male divine soldiers were burned to death. All the female divine soldiers disappeared without a trace. It was unknown where he had taken them. The 4 world breakers laughed. The formation of great chaos was broken into thousands of different sizes. Suddenly, the celestial court looked like it was going to collapse. If the Chaos Sky Big Array was destroyed, the 4 break world people would have to follow the original spirits to find the deified pool. With their current power, they could not destroy the deified pool that the 7 Buddhas and the 9 paths used sky powers to create, but they were confident they could seal it up. If the celestial court failed, the 4 world breakers would be suppressed by the 4 world breakers. They would not be able to suppress the 4 world breakers. Seeing that the celestial court was going to lose, 4 gold and silver lights flashed in space. 4,000 miles long dragon boas of fire and ice emerged from the void. They widely opened their mouths and let out golden and silver beams of cold and hot light, penetrating Sha Tu's vital body parts in a twinkling of an eye. His eyebrows, throat, heart, and stomach were all smashed by the 4 gold horn brothers' life god lights. Sha Tu grunted. His reflection of heaven and earth had been broken. His body spewed out a lot of black air. His body returned to its original shape. His body trembled violently as ice and flame emerged on the surface of his skin at the same time. The natal divine light of the 4 men was no longer the same as it was in the past. After the lessons taught by Wu Qi in the 7 Saints' Palace, their natal divine light had taken on the unique aura of the sacred realm. Sha Tu's body's power was weakening. That attack had put him from the peak of Tao reunion back to the peak of Tao breaking. Before he could come back to his senses, Jin Jiao let out a long roar. Then, 4 dragon pythons pounced on him excitedly with their claws and fangs, scratching and tearing at him. Poor Sha Tu. His armor was torn to pieces, his sword was also snatched away by Jin Jiao and thrown far away. Not long after, he was torn to pieces and no longer looked human. White Mantis and Hell Bug were shocked. They were going to help Sha Tu, but suddenly, a 5-colored light fell from the sky. Countless 5-colored threads drilled into their flying insects. Yi Xia stepped on a 5-colored cloud and floated down. She smiled at the sky full of flying insects and said, Oh, it is a god power that can split billions of minds. That is impressive. But, are these clones immortal? With a light clap of her slender hand, the five-colored demonic flame swept out in all directions. Every single flying insect had a ball of violent demonic flame spurting out from their bodies. White mantis and hell bug screamed. 99% of their flying insects had been burned. The remaining flying insects flew back and barely formed their bodies. But their power had fallen from the peak of Tao reunion back to the level of Tao reasoning. Yang Xian, who was stuffing beautiful female immortals into his sleeves, was startled. He turned around and shouted, "Be careful, there's something strange about these people. They're much stronger than those trashes." Before he finished speaking, 5 shocking sword energies fell from the sky and hit Yang Xian almost at the same time. Yang Xian felt his demon aura shatter as if billions of lightning bolts had struck his head at the same time. His mind was in a mess, and he couldn't react for a moment. The 5 sword energies smashed Yang Xian to death. Then, they disintegrated and turned into 5 divine lights that formed a dazzling millstone, swallowing Yang Xian. The 5-colored millstone moved fast, and Yang Xian's body became smaller and smaller in the millstone. Endless demon aura was squeezed out of Yang Xian's body. Then, the 5-colored god light returned to its original form and turned it into heaven and earth spirit energy that scattered everywhere. Princess Zhanglu stepped on a purple air and descended from the sky. She smiled mockingly and coldly shouted, "Is this the power of the celestial court? Is this the power of your holiness? This is so funny. You can't even deal with 4 world breakers who haven't recovered their original power, and you still have the face to fight for power with my husband? How dare you?" 6 clouds of purple air flew over. The 6 sky kings reformed their god bodies and returned to the sky prison. Hearing Princess Zhongli's rude and sarcastic words, the 6 sky kings' faces turned purple. They were like 6 purple eggplants. Chapter 1184. On Pangu continent, Rising Water City, the capital city of Dayu's Rising South Province, was surrounded. Rising Water Province was a first-class first-grade province in the southern region of Dayu, and one of the provinces with the longest history. It had a population of more than 100 billion, and Rising Water City was so large that it was almost as big as Liangzhu. In the villages and cities around the city alone, there were hundreds of millions of people living there. At the moment, Rising Water City was surrounded by tens of millions of soldiers. Murderous auras towered into the sky as troops after troops of soldiers were attacking the city. Plumes of dust kept rising from the walls of Rising Water City, which were kicked up when the foundations of the walls were shaken. The gigantic Rising Water City was like a small boat in a vast ocean, while the black mass of Shaman army was the raging ocean that was stirring up huge waves, wanting to swallow the city whole. Driven by hundreds of forbidden clansmen, dozens of mammoths, each 1,000 feet tall and covered in thick scales, were slamming the city walls with all their might. With each impact, large chunks of earth and rocks flew everywhere, sparks burst from the immortal formations deployed on the walls, and cracks spread across the walls visible to the naked eyes. From time to time, soldiers were knocked off the walls. After Xian dynasty replaced Dayu, Zhang Tingyun had sent his men to take over a strategic place like Rising Water City. Xian dynasty was the dynasty of the human race supported by the Tao League, so all its rules were different from those of Dayu. Currently, Rising Water City was guarded by an army of 30,000 cultivators, led by a 3rd-tier gold immortal. Among them, there were only a dozen gold immortals and 500 heaven immortals, while the rest were cultivators ranging from the realm of Jin Dan to the realm of nascent divinity. Rising Water City used to have a perfect defensive system, but when Dayu evacuated Pangu continent, the oracles who guarded the city had destroyed all the formations, leaving not even a single energy stone behind. The Xian dynasty had been ruling over Ascending Water City for nearly 100 years now, but the gold immortals guarding this place only cared about plundering the land and collecting cultivation materials. Some of them were given to the higher-ups of the Xian dynasty while the rest were sent back to their sect. Therefore, there were only a few immortal formations on the city wall, which had a circumference of hundreds of miles. Although these immortal formations could cover the entire city, the actual defensive power of these immortal formations was less than 1% of what it was in the period of Diyu. Never in his wildest dreams did the gold immortal guarding Rising Water City imagine that one day, a terrifying army would come to attack the city, and under the banner of Diyu. What's more, he didn't expect was that these people had attacked the city just to kill, completely ignoring the messengers he had sent out to discuss the surrender plan. The sorcerer army charged towards the city like waves. The cultivators on the city wall who were not very powerful roared and cast various spells to chase the sorcerer army off the city wall. Under the threat of these cultivators, over 1 million militiamen who had been temporarily recruited were using their own flesh and blood to resist the invasion of the sorcerer army. Ordinary militiamen, who had never cultivated any cultivation techniques, were fighting against the sorcerer army soldiers whose minds had been destroyed by the Forbidden Clan with a secret potion, which stimulated their greatest potential. This wasn't a war, but a massacre. A group of sorcerer army charged up the city wall and slaughtered thousands of militiamen. Their essence, energy and souls were sucked clean by the sorcerer armor, and then the group retreated. Another group of sorcerer army charged up and slaughtered thousands more militiamen. The gold immortals guarding the city were at a loss as to what to do. The thousands of cultivators with the strongest cultivation bases did not go up to the city wall to fight. Instead, they searched for young and strong men in the city. Every time they caught a group of nearly 10,000 people, they would be given a roughly made steel blade and pushed onto the city wall. These militiamen, who had been hastily armed, were often killed as soon as they set foot on the city wall. However, the sorcerer army who killed them did not take the opportunity to invade the city. Instead, they retreated in an orderly manner, and another group of sorcerer army rushed up. This bizarre massacre had been going on for a day and a night. There were already millions of sorcerer army soldiers in Rising Water City, and more than 10 million refugees had fled into the city. After 1 day and 1 night, the immortals and cultivators in the city had armed more than 3 million young men and thrown them into the battlefield. None of the 3 million young men survived. All of them were killed, not even a single one was wounded. But, all the immortals were frightened by the sorcerer army. They had no idea what the enemy was trying to do. They were still arming the militiamen in the city and sending them up the city wall to be slaughtered. As time went by, strong women and children began to appear among the armed militiamen. Thick black smoke enveloped the city. On a mountain in the distance, Liu Bang stood with his hands clasped behind his back, facing the wind. Looking at the city, he suddenly sighed deeply and said, "How many people have we killed? 10 billion? 100 billion? Pangu continent is vast and boundless. How many people are there on this vast continent? If we kill them all?" Han Xian clenched his fists and said, "Your Majesty, it's time to make a decision." Staring blankly at the city, Liu Bang said in a low voice, "But, I'm afraid of death." A fiend light flickered rapidly on Liu Bang's chest. Liu Bang's body began to tremble slightly as a sharp pain attacked his heart. He clenched his teeth so hard that they made a cracking sound. Clenching his fists tightly, Liu Bang said through gritted teeth, "I am really afraid of death." Han Xian took a deep breath. He looked at the city in the distance, which was swaying in the wind and rain and was about to fall, and punched the ground hard, leaving dozens of thick cracks on the mountain. He lowered his voice and bellowed, "Even if we help them kill all the people on Pangu continent, can we really not die?" Liu Bang's eyes turned red. Gritting his teeth, he murmured in a low voice, hold on a little longer. Give me a little more time. Once I succeed, I'll fight them to the death. But now, even if we fight with all our strength, we can be killed with just a thought from them. Our deaths will be too worthless." Gasping for breath, Han Xian closed his eyes tightly. Countless members of the forbidden clans ran happily through the foot of the mountain, driving countless wild beasts and poisonous insects that had just been transformed by the secret medicine to join the attack on Rising Water City. Among them, there was a large swarm of mutated poisonous bees. The black bees, which were the size of a thumb, were now the size of a human head, and their bodies were covered with black stripes that looked like tiger skin, which made them look extremely ferocious and horrible. There were more than 1,000,000 of them. Like a thundercloud, they flew over Lu Bang and Han Xian's heads and rushed impatiently toward Rising Water City. This city is finished. Lu Bang flicked his sleeve and said with a gloomy face, when all the people in the city are dead, I'll find an excuse to camp here and rest. The longer I can buy them, the fewer people I'll have to kill, and I'll have a few more days. Kill all the people in the city. I'd rather they die than turn into soulless monsters. Try to control the number of the shaman army, and we can't let them expand any further. Blood was flowing from the corner of Han Xian's mouth. He had bitten his tongue with his teeth. Only with such severe pain could he control the flames of madness in his heart. He nodded slowly, turned around, and walked away without saying a word. Looking at Rising Water City, Lu Bang murmured in a low voice, I'll try to save as many people as I can. I'm going to be the human emperor. How can I let you evil devils kill so many people? If you kill all the people, who will I rule in the future? Pa! Spitting on the ground, Lu Bang abruptly lifted his cloak, took out his penis, and boosted up his power. A stream of water poured down from the mountaintop. Faint yellow water droplets fell straight down from the mountaintop, splashing on the faces and heads of those people from the forbidden clans, who had been rushing across the city. No one knew where he got so much water from. The stream of water lasted for a whole hour, covering an area of hundreds of miles. After waiting for the forbidden clans to pass by, Lu Bang heaved a sigh of relief and angrily stuffed his family jewels back into his mouth. Pointing one finger at the sky and the other at the ground, he cursed in a low voice, one day, I'll make your heads into chamber pots and put them on the crossroads of my future capital city. Every time a passerby passes by, they will have to pee on your heads. Anyone who dares to violate this rule will have his 9 generations executed. While Lu Bang was cursing, a dark cloud rolled down from the sky. From the dark cloud, 100 miles long black dragon poked its head out, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Ao Buzan, who had transformed into Zhu Long's true body, looked towards Rising Water City for a while, then cried out in shock, My mother, why did so many people die? Are those commanders in the city idiots? Why did they send batches of people out to be killed? Throwing his head back and roaring, Ao Buzan roared, Listen up, generals in Rising Water City. Your grandpa is here to save you bastards. Activate the defensive formation, and I alone will be able to kill those monsters outside the city. Amidst his wild laughter, a thick stream of water roared out from the dark cloud, coming from the lower half of Ao Buzan's body. Accompanied by flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder, the stream of water transformed into waves of water and poured down from the sky. A sudden flood appeared around Rising Water City. The water was 300 feet deep, and the density of the water was 1,000 times greater than that of Mercury. It swept out in all directions, turning into a gigantic whirlpool that swept away all the shaman army outside the city. The waves of water brought tens of millions of magi soldiers and countless people from forbidden clans out of Rising Water City. When they were 3,000 miles away from the city, a loud boom rang out, and the whirlpool exploded. Countless yellow liquid droplets shot out like shooting stars, breaking the bones and tendons of those magi soldiers and people from forbidden clans. Before long, all of them were smashed into pieces, and not even a slightly bigger piece could be found. Standing on a mountaintop, Lu Bang looked at Ao Buzan in the sky with a blank expression. With a complicated look on his face, Lu Bang roared out in exasperation, This guy. How can his pee be so earth-shattering? My magi army was actually driven away by him. Not only Lu Bang, the faces of Han Xian and the other generals, who witnessed this scene with their own eyes, darkened as well. Fortunately, when the magi army attacked the city, they did not stay in the army to command, as they still had a conscience. Otherwise, they would definitely suffer a disaster. As generals, it was fine if they were killed by the enemy, as they were not people who were afraid of death. But to be killed by someone's pee, this was just too heart-wrenching. This guy is a complete bastard. Han Xian and the group of generals cursed Ao Buzan's ancestors at the same time. Chapter 1185. High up in the sky, Wu Qi, Supremacy de Yi, and Reverend Shou Zhuo plunged down like 3 shooting stars, smashing straight into the great Luo heaven. Behind them, He Ku and Qi Yan were hot on their heels. Yu Ju had turned into a vast black aura and flew over. Yu Ju's body was incomparably huge. When he moved, the entire sky was covered by the black aura. When they were 1,000,000 miles away from the Daoyu Ocean, De Yi Venerable and Shou Zhuo made a strange gesture. Their bodies curled up like meatballs. Wu Qi pressed on the two of them. His hands shook, and the two of them turned into a strong light that shot toward the Daoyu Ocean. Their speed was 10,000 times faster than when they were flying. Wu Qi pushed the two of them away. His body shrank into a meatball as well. With a strong light, he slammed into the Daoyu Ocean. Old ghosts, it's time to welcome our guest. The world breaker is here. Amidst his deafening roar, the restrictive spells jointly deployed by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs were shattered layer by layer, and Supremacy Shouzhua and Supremacy's tendons and bones were broken as they coughed up mouthfuls of blood. But with Wu Qi's god power's protection, the two of them tore through the Daoyu Ocean's restrictions. They slammed into the palace of Tao Origin and smashed dozens of the buildings inside. It was especially so when the Great Yi Supremacy slammed into a Tao sect master who was cultivating in seclusion in a pavilion. The sect master let out a miserable howl as his immortal body, which he had refined for countless years, crumbled. Even his immortal soul was almost shattered by the Great Yi Supremacy. Billions of years of hard work had gone down the drain. The head sect master's immortal soul flew out and floated in the air. She really wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She pointed at the Great Unity Supremacy and cursed. De Yi Supremacy rolled on the ground, smashing through the palaces and pavilions along the way. As he coughed up blood, he shouted, "This is not Lao Tzu's fault. It was the world breaker who hurt Lao Tzu. Do you think Lao Tzu wants to be a ball and come in here?" Another series of loud booms rang out as Wu Qi fell from the sky. At last, all the restrictive spells in the sky above great overarching heaven had been smashed to pieces by him. Countless streams of light drifted in all directions as he staggered into the great hall where the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs were cultivating in seclusion. The sound of cracking bones rang out as the great hall collapsed. Hundreds of powerful restrictive spells were destroyed by his blow, but all his bones were broken, and he fell down in front of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs like a puddle of mud. 16 strong God wills scanned Wu Qi's body. The 7 Buddhas and 9 paths of cultivation stood up and looked up into the sky. Wu Qi's meridians were all broken, and his organs were like minced meat. Even his god soul was dim. He was hurt badly, but there was nothing to worry about. The most important thing now was the people who hurt Wu Qi. To be able to hurt Wu Qi like this, those people must have a high level of cultivation. Wu Qi and the other two were smashed into the Daoyu Ocean Dao Yuan Palace. Who could say those world breakers did not do it on purpose? Alarms were ringing in the palace of Tao Origin. Apart from the unlucky great sect leader whose immortal body had collapsed, all the other elites of Tao League had arrived from all directions. Under the command of the 36 sect leaders, countless Tao reasoning primordial immortals and peak-level gold immortals had formed a supreme formation. As a result, an immense aura rushed in from all directions, and the outline of the formation gradually turned blurry and hazy, making it impossible to see what was inside. Black Skeleton and Red Mantis, who were chasing after them, sneered and said at the same time, "Are you the strongest existences in this world? I really don't want to fight you so soon, but we have no choice. Since you have found us, we have to fight you." The Black Skeleton in Black Skeleton's hand let out a shrill ghost howl. 2 streams of black smoke shot out of its deep eye sockets and pierced right into the heads of Guarding Heart Buddha and Purple Eyebrows Daozu. The 2 great hierarchs froze. Black Skeleton slapped the chin of Black Skeleton, and 2 black lotuses suddenly bloomed above their heads. Countless lotus petals twirled around them, and purple blood spurted out of the nostrils of guarding heart Buddha and purple eyebrows Daozu at the same time. Countless golden lotuses bloomed above guarding heart Buddha's head, but as soon as they bloomed, they were cut down by the black lotuses. Each lotus represented an eon of guarding heart Buddha's cultivation. In just a second, guarding heart Buddha's power was cut down by hundreds of eons by the black lotuses. Just like guarding heart Buddha, there was a cloud drifting above purple eyebrows Daozu's head as well. Vaguely, one could see countless green lotuses blooming in the cloud. However, the bizarre black lotus continued to swivel at high speed, and the azure lotuses continued to wither and fall to the ground. Every single azure lotus contained an aeon's worth of immortal energy. Dao Father Violet Brow's face became very ugly to behold. He had lost nearly 100 more of his immortal energy than Buddha Heart Protector had. He was at a severe disadvantage. The other Daozu and Buddha snorted coldly at the same time. Chi-Chi took a step forward and was about to make a move. But before they could do anything, they heard Red Mantis sneer, and the two fist-sized red hearts next to her suddenly began beating violently. Within a second, the two hearts beat tens of thousands of times. Then, the bodies of Daozu and Buddha trembled, and a fist-sized meatball suddenly popped out of their chests. Blood sprayed out of their mouths at the same time. The black skulls and red mantis were so strange that even Buddha and Daozu were caught unprepared and suffered a great loss. "Tell me your names, evildoers. I've never seen you in the chaos." Buddha Guarding Will cried out. Chi Yen giggled, twisted her slim waist, and gave Buddha Shui a coquettish look. "Chaos? Are you talking about the wreckage of the sacred realm outside?" How could you have met us back then? When the sacred realm collapsed, our flesh and bones were destroyed, and only a wisp of our broken souls escaped. It took us so many years to reform our bodies." Licking her lips, Red Mantis narrowed her eyes at Buddha Guarding Will and said, "You have a strong body, and you look energetic. I wonder how you will fare in a fight." Twisting her waist, Red Mantis smiled and said, "We also have a sister, and she likes tall, mighty men like you the most. I wonder if you have the guts to spend the night with her." Buddha Guarding Will sneered. He raised his hand, and a vajra rose into the sky and struck down at Red Mantis's head. Buddha Shui's attack was extremely fast, and his sneak attack was so fast that Scarlet Mantis didn't even have a chance to dodge. The vajra struck Red Mantis's forehead, turning half of her head into minced meat in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, the beautiful woman turned into a hideous woman with only half of her head. "Fuck your grandma." Red Mantis cursed and cursed the elder of Buddha Guarding Will fiercely. The two hearts flying around her sprayed out a large amount of sticky, dirty blood into her mouth. In the wound on her head, countless granulation tissues wriggled rapidly and reformed her beautiful head in the blink of an eye. Even the long hair on her scalp quickly grew back. However, her aura, which had reached the peak of the Tao fusing realm, had now rapidly dropped to the level of the early stage of the Tao fusing realm. The Buddha and Taoist Alpha were very happy. Clearly, their attacks dealt a lot of damage to the break world beings. Although they could not kill them, if they kept weakening their power, the break world beings would not be impossible to deal with. As long as they could weaken them to the limit, they could imprison them forever. When End fell into a deep sleep, as long as the 13 world breakers created by End were suppressed, Pangu world would truly be safe and sound. They would have more time to study the secret of Spirit, and eventually, they would be able to merge with the power of Spirit and become truly immortal beings. From then on, they would be able to transcend the mortal world and become saints. The long-browed Tao Father laughed coldly. Thousands of thumb-thick bolts of lightning shot out of his sleeves like swimming fish, soundlessly circling in a large circle before striking the black skeleton in the middle of his back. Black Skull had been completely focused on controlling the black skeleton to destroy Tao Father Violet Brow's and Buddha Protector's energies. Caught completely off guard, the black skeleton was struck head-on by the bolts of lightning. These bolts of lightning had been forged by Tao Father Longbrows using his lifeblood true flame and the most powerful type of lightning in the primordial chaos, the 5 elements. Every single bolt of lightning was powerful enough to heavily injure an early-stage Tao merge expert. These thunderbolts were Daozu's most powerful thunder magic. Now that he had cast thousands of thunderbolts at once, he had almost used up 40% of the thunderbolts in his storage. Black Skeleton howled in pain as she was blown hundreds of thousands of miles away. Except for her head, her entire body was destroyed. Only the lower half of her spine was still there, with some tendons hanging on it. However, those tendons were slowly burning. A purple thunderbolt was attached to them, burning them into smoke. Black Skeleton raised her head and screamed. Black smoke came from Yuju and was quickly sucked into Black Skeleton's mouth. Black smoke spread out, and Black Skeleton quickly reformed into an enchanting and beautiful body. However, her power had fallen from the level of Dao fusing, and she was only at the level of Dao breaking. After all, they were facing the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Dao, who stood at the peak of Pangu world. Their powers were at the peak of this world, and a casual move from them could destroy everything in the world. If Black Skeleton and Qi Yan didn't have the Immortal Soul Seal as their trump cards, their souls would have been destroyed long ago. The enormous Yuju slowly descended from the sky. Black smoke rolled and turned into an enormous 9-headed serpent, hovering above the palace of Dao Origin. He raised his head and screamed. The 9-headed serpent opened its mouth and breathed out a 9-colored light that covered the entire palace of Dao Origin. All the natural energies in the palace began to boil, and even the immortal energies in the bodies of the sect masters and gold immortals began to boil. All the spirit energy and magic power went out of control, as if they had gone mad. Accompanied by countless hurried cries, all the gold immortals in the palace of Dao Essence exploded at the same time, and their immortal souls also exploded. Yuju was able to infect the heavenly Dao, but now, he was only trying to infect the bodies of these immortals. It was as easy as killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. Daozu and Qiqi were shocked. They turned to look at the extreme great array laid out by the Dao League's immortals. "All disciples," shouted Purple Brows Daozu, "run for your lives. All disciples of Dao League, join hands and kill this demon," cried Buddha Guarding Heart. Flustered and exasperated, Yuju glared at Buddha Guarding Heart and nearly pulled out his sword to kill the old bald thief. However, before Violet Brow Dao Father could draw his sword, Nether Ju began to laugh evilly. The dozens of Dao reasoning primordial immortals in the formation let out soft sighs as well. Unable to suppress the violent immortal energy in their bodies, they exploded and died at the same time. Chapter 1186. In the depths of the Vulture Mountain was a forest of acacia trees that stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles. The golden acacia was cultivated by the Buddhist sect using a secret technique. Its trunk was tall and beautiful, and its entire body was golden red in color. It emitted a strange fragrance that could help stabilize a cultivator's soul and foundation. It could also stimulate a man's yang flame and a woman's yin flame. To put it bluntly, the trees were natural aphrodisiacs, and even Dao-breaking experts could produce a strange effect as long as they breathed in the aroma. If cultivators who practiced the delightful Zen technique could cultivate in this forest, the men would be endlessly filled with yang energy, while the women would be endlessly filled with yin energy. Both men and women would be able to enjoy the harmony of yin and yang for a long time, and obtain countless benefits from it. The delightful Zen sect had spent countless eons of hard work to cultivate such a unique forest of acacia trees in the depths of the Vulture Mountain. Therefore, every branch and leaf here was extremely precious, and no one was qualified to have a cave abode of their own unless they held a high position in the delightful Zen sect. The current sect master of the delightful Zen sect, the 9 Dragons Wishful Buddha who ranked 98th among the 100 sects of Buddhism, was none other than Lao Ai. In the center of the acacia trees was a pond of clear water, measuring about 100 acres in circumference. The water in the pond was the cleansing pure water unique to the Buddhist League, the cleanest thing in the world. No matter what kind of dirt it was, it would return to its original state with just a gentle brush. In the outside world, this was a supreme divine item that could cleanse the mind and suppress the inner demons, but here, it was just a huge bathhouse. Hundreds of young and beautiful female cultivators were lazily soaking in the clean water, moaning softly from their mouths from time to time. These female cultivators were all brimming with energy. The weakest among them was an 18th grade golden immortal, while the strongest had almost stepped into the door of the Tao reasoning realm. They were just one step away from ascending to the position of Buddha. There were at least 100 female cultivators who were just a little bit away from attaining the cultivation of Buddha, and the rest were all bodhisattva cultivators. Standing beside the pond was Lao Ai, who stood 10 feet tall and had a skin as fair as jade, a faint pink mist seeping out of his eyes, and a jade-like skin that glowed with a golden light. His entire body was covered with muscles that made him look like a statue. His hands were holding a slender and beautiful female cultivator, and he was crazily moving in and out of the female cultivator's body with an astonishing frequency. A pink swastika, measuring 36 feet in diameter, hovered above their heads. A beam of red light shot out of Lao Ai's head, while a beam of white light shot out of the woman's head. The two colors of light intertwined in the swastika and gradually turned into a huge Taiji symbol. At the center of the seal were dozens of shadows of a man and a woman, whose bodies were intertwined together. Wisps of subtle auras were constantly seeping out from these shadows, gradually fusing into the bodies of Lao Ai and the female cultivator. Wisps of subtle auras were seeping out of these shadows of men and women, of subtle auras of them, and were seeping into Lao Ai's and woman. Their cultivation and taoff of. And yang of chi. Of energy, Lao. All of a sudden, the female cultivator's body trembled violently, and she let out a shrill scream. 9 layers of Buddhist light flashed behind Lao Ai's head as he cried out in a low voice, "Pink skeletons, life and death are all illusions." Strange howls rang out of nowhere around them, while countless fiend shadows could be vaguely seen around them, looking as if they were going to tear them to pieces and devour them. Lao Ai's body grew taller and taller, while the female cultivator's body did not change at all. Her delicate body was swallowing and spitting out Lao Ai's huge object, which was emitting a faint purple-gold gleam. Suddenly, a deep chanting of Buddhist scripture was heard coming from all directions. Madman Shui, whose cultivation base was now firmly standing at the peak of Gold Immortal Realm, was walking slowly toward them with 3,600 Buddhist cultivators from the Blissful sect. They were circling around Lao Ai while chanting strange incantations. Suddenly, the flesh of the female cultivator who was entangled with Lao Ai shriveled, and in just a blink of an eye, she had turned into a pink skeleton. At that very moment, Lao Ai's aura shrank abruptly, as if a towering tree had been struck by a thunderbolt and turned into charcoal. There was no aura left in him at all, as if he had become a dead man. All that was left of Lao Ai was a husk, empty and lifeless. All his spirit, energy, and soul had been injected into the female cultivator's abdomen. A speck of light flickered in the lower abdomen of the pink skeleton, and gradually, a miraculous light shone out of it. A rich life force rolled and rushed out in all directions. Like a spring rain on a spring night, Lao Ai's body suddenly regained its vitality. The female cultivator's body, which had turned into a pink skeleton, gradually returned to her original appearance. On top of that, she looked even more energetic and beautiful than before. Meanwhile, a deafening rumble rang out from within Lao Ai's body, as if there were tens of thousands of dragons fighting and killing each other in his body. A blinding golden light was emanating from him. Lao Ai threw his head back and let out a long cry. His cultivation base had suddenly broken through from the peak of the realm of Tao reasoning to the realm of Tao breaking, and both his magical power and cultivation base were growing rapidly. With a soft cry, the beautiful female cultivator was once again turned into a skeleton, and Lao Ai's body became lifeless once more. This happened 9 times. Each time, Lao Ai comprehended the supreme truth between life and death, comprehending the supreme truth of the Buddhist League amidst the boundless pleasure that came crashing down like landslides and tsunamis. He was like a mighty god looking down at all the living beings in the mortal world, but those living beings were the manifestation of the god's own flesh, blood, and spirit. Only the most original spirit of the god hovered in the sky, quietly and coldly watching all the changes that happened to him. His body was burning, and his heart was as clear as ice. Between life and death, he broke through the iron threshold of the mortal world and leaped out of the 5 elements and 3 realms. The female cultivator turned from a pink skeleton to a skeleton, and from a skeleton to a beautiful woman. After this happened 9 times, not only did Lao Ai's cultivation base reach the peak of the first tier of the realm of Dao breaking, her overall strength had also broken through to the realm of Dao breaking. With a sweet smile, the female cultivator's fleshly body split into a sheet of golden flame. From the flame, a bodhisattva of the Buddhist League, clad in jewels and adorned with jewels, slowly walked out and knelt respectfully before Lao Ai. A pink flame burst out from Lao Ai's body as well. The raging flame burned all the fiend's shadows in the surrounding void, and none of them could get within 10,000 miles of Lao Ai's body. Sticky fluid kept flowing out of his body, which was melted by the flame into a faint aroma that spread in all directions. Lao Ai's golden body grew purer and purer. Gradually, it turned transparent, and shone with a bright, lustrous light. Madman Shui dropped to his knees in ecstasy and said loudly, "Congratulations, Master. Congratulations. Master, you've achieved a great success in your cultivation base. From now on, you're the only one in the Buddhist League." Lao Ai blinked and came next to Madman Shui, kicking him several tens of feet away. Naked, he threw his head back and let out a loud laugh. After laughing for a long while, he finally scolded, "Nonsense. What a load of bullshit. One in the Buddhist League? Those 7 old fogies are still alive, so how can one be the only one in the Buddhist League? Even if all 7 of them are dead, there are still so many revered ones." Spitting heavily on the ground, Lao Ai sneered and said, "Unless I can find another 8 top-notch cultivation vessels for Buddhist nuns and nuns who have been reincarnated for 1,000,000 generations, how can I be the strongest cultivator in the Buddhist League?" Sighing in distress, Lao Ai scolded in a low voice, "But, how rare is it to find a supreme-grade cultivation vessel who has been a nun for generations? It's already a blessing from the heaven to find one of them. TSK, 1,000,000 transmigrations, and a little unexpected. TSK, a supreme-grade cultivation vessel who has never tasted a man for 1,000,000 transmigrations. It's already not bad to find one." Madman Shui sprung to his feet, then laughed and said, "Isn't that easy, Master? No matter what, you're one of the sect leaders of 100 Buddhist sects now. Hee, a supreme-grade cultivation vessel like her is indeed rare, but if we are the ones." Lao Ai narrowed his eyes, while Madman Shui chuckled. The pair of master and disciple exchanged a strange glance for a while, then burst out laughing at the same time. Rubbing his palms excitedly, Lao Ai murmured in a low voice, "Well, it's rare to find a Buddhist nun who has lived through millions of transmigrations in the Buddhist League. But, there are a few female bodhisattvas now. Hee, especially that golden-bodied dragon mother Buddha. TSK, it seems she has lived through many transmigrations as well. Becoming a Buddha with the body of a woman, this old nun's cultivation base is not simple. But, that old rabbit is doing quite well under golden-bodied dragon mother Buddha now, so I'm a little embarrassed to do it." While Lao Ai was talking about the friendship between him and Lord Longyang, Madman Shui was clamoring beside him, "Master, every man for himself. Why don't you just use that golden-bodied dragon mother Buddha as a cultivation vessel? At the worst, I'll just give her some compensation, money, and things. She will also benefit from the secret dual cultivation technique of the Blissful Zen sect. Tisk, it's not like she'll lose a piece of her flesh. As long as you force yourself on her, don't tell me she'll have to fight you to the death after that." Laughing strangely, Madman Shui said in a low voice, "If you really force yourself on golden-bodied dragon mother Buddha, won't that Lord Longyang have to call you Grandmaster when he sees you?" Lao Ai's face was flushed with excitement. Waving his hands and feet, he said with a smile, "Wonderful, wonderful beyond words. Just for that old rabbit to call me Grandmaster, I'll have to force myself on golden-bodied dragon mother Buddha. TSK, I've got to think of a way to do it without alarming those old bald thieves." Just as the master and disciple were pondering whether they should abduct golden-bodied dragon mother Buddha by force, or simply use a sleeping powder on her, Lao Ai suddenly smelled a faint but unforgettable fragrance that smelled like an orchid blooming in a deep valley at night. Hastily, Lao Ai spun and looked into the forest of acacia trees. He saw a young girl, petite and thin as an orchid, clad in a long black robe, standing under an acacia tree and looking timidly at them. For some unknown reason, Lao Ai, who had seen countless people, suddenly had a strong desire to possess this girl. His entire body and soul were burning up. Like a mad bull that had been ruthlessly stabbed in the buttocks, he roared and pounced towards the girl. Even Madman Shui and the 3,600 Buddhist cultivators from the Blissful Zen sect were staring fixedly at the girl, and none of them noticed that her hands were stained with blood. And none of them noticed that the forest of acacia trees had become a sea of corpses, with the corpses of the disciples of the Blissful Zen sect lying everywhere. Chapter 1187. With a flash of golden light, a golden Buddha sitting cross-legged on a lotus throne was beheaded. The heavy golden body fell heavily to the ground, and the bald head, which was shrouded in Buddhist light, bounced a few times on the ground, and then gradually dimmed. A sharp claw pierced into the forehead of the Buddha. After a series of bone-grinding sounds that made one's teeth ache, 3 fist-sized purple relics were dug out by the claw. The 3 relics glowed with a purple light as if they were carved out of crystal, and a faint golden reclining Buddha could be seen in them. But at this moment, the Buddha statue was gradually dissipating, and a strong aura of Buddhism was constantly leaking out of the relics. The owner of the claw, a twisted figure shrouded in grey mist, laughed grimly, opened his mouth, and swallowed the 3 relics. Suddenly, the aura around him became much stronger. This was the Treasure Flame Heart Light Cave, of the Great Vulture Mountain, the dojo of the Buddhist seclusion Treasure Flame Heart Buddha. But now, Treasured Flame Heart Buddha was killed, and his disciples were lying on the ground in a disorderly manner. All the Buddhist cultivators were beheaded with a single slash. Their relics were dug out and all their essence chi was devoured. Even the novice monks who were responsible for cleaning, and even the little monks who had not cultivated to the level of arhat, were killed. Red, golden, and pure purple blood splashed all over the ground. The silhouette shrouded in the grey mist walked in the thick puddle of blood, leaving a line of bright bloody footprints behind as he slowly walked towards another Buddha's dojo that was not too far away. The ominous grey mist drifted in the sky, and Buddhist disciples were everywhere, their eyes lifeless. Their bodies were numb, and even their divine sense was sealed by the strange mist. They had lost all perception of the outside world. The figure in the grey fog slowly walked to their side, swung his blade, and chopped off their heads, swallowing all their relics. From the Buddha in the Tao reasoning realm to the novice monks with the weakest cultivation base, blood flowed like rivers, and corpses piled up like mountains wherever he went. I am Swan and I love your energy crystals so much. The grey figure trembled with excitement in the mist. He murmured in a low voice, so convenient for me to harvest, so convenient for me to devour. Ha ha ha, how clean can I be when I kill people? How delicious would it be to cut them in half and harvest their energy crystals? That perverted woman, Byung, always makes herself a bloody mess. She's not beautiful at all. The grey shadow of the blade stabbed into the heart of a bodhisattva, then slowly cut his body into dozens of pieces. He muttered in a low voice, it's still the most beautiful when I kill people. Clean and tidy, killing the entire chi-chi. The bodhisattva was quickly dismembered into countless pieces of flesh and bones, which were piled up on the ground by chi-chi. Baiyan's claws dug into his forehead and dug out his natal relic. A low crashing sound came from the side. A few Buddhist spirit birds resting on the branches lost their strength and fell from the branches, smashing heavily on the ground. Lao Ai walked over slowly and waved his saber, cutting these spiritual birds into 2. In the acacia forest of the blissful sect, Lao Ai had already pinned the lady in black under his body. The lady let out a weak and delicate cry as she grabbed Lao Ai's shoulder with both hands, leaving a few bloody palm prints on his skin with her cold and slippery hands. Lao Ai was enraged by her weak resistance. He gave a deep roar, grabbed the lady's black robe, and pulled it from the collar. It was a black robe. The woman was only wearing a large and empty robe. Apart from that, there was nothing else on her body. Her slender and fair body was struggling weakly under Lao Ai's tall and muscular body. She narrowed her eyes and smiled, letting out a sharp, thin moan that sounded like the moan of a seriously wounded cat. Lao Ai laughed wildly. He held the lady's shoulder tightly and entered her body without hesitation. The lady opened her mouth and cried out in surprise, as if she was amazed by Lao Ai's sturdiness. The smile on her face grew wider, and she wrapped her arms tightly around Lao Ai's neck. While enduring Lao Ai's storm-like attacks, she moaned softly, "Good, very good. You will be the last one to die. You will live the longest in this Gridrakota mountain." Two slender legs clamped around Lao Ai's lion-like waist, and the scene looked like two bean sprouts wrapped around a thick tree trunk. But, it was Lao Ai who let out a painful cry. He felt as if two pythons were strangling him, and an irresistible force came assaulting him. His waist heated up, and the heat in his body poured out like a tide from a broken dam. His body trembled violently, and the irresistible pleasure lasted for a full quarter of an hour. Then, his energy began to leak out, and his cultivation base dropped from the peak of the first tier of Tao breaking to the third tier. The irresistible heat in his dantian swept through his entire body. His eyes turned bloodshot, and he began to collide violently again like a bomb that was about to explode. After a few collisions, he didn't even have time to enjoy the ecstasy of the woman's body when his body trembled violently for another quarter of an hour. His cultivation base dropped from the third tier of Tao breaking to the sixth tier. Lao Ai's face became thinner, and his eyes turned dark and sunken. Madman Shua and the others had rushed over, staring fixedly at the slender and fair body of the lady while swallowing their saliva. The lady giggled. She gave Madman Shua and the others a coquettish look, then said softly, "Don't worry, don't worry. When I finish eating this good girl, it will be your turn. Although your cultivation base is a little weak, and not even enough for me to take a bite, you are all so strong." A strange pink mist enveloped the entire acacia forest. Half of the Great Vulture Mountain was enveloped by this pink mist. The other half was shrouded in a gray mist. Apart from the pink and gray mist, the rest of Mount Vulture was plunged into a deep black mist. Amidst the black mist, World Exalt's coffin and World Exalt's coffin were fighting a shadow that flashed rapidly in the void with dozens of other World Exalts. Dozens of the strongest World Exalts of the Buddhist League had joined hands to fight against the enemy, but their faces were filled with despair and fear. They roared hoarsely and kept using all kinds of Buddhist treasures to attack the black shadow. But no matter what treasures they used, as long as the black aura touched them, their Buddhist treasures would immediately be polluted and fall to the ground. Even the golden bodies of these World Exalts had begun to turn dim, and their strength was rapidly weakening. Suddenly, the shadow flashed by, and World Exalt's coffin howled miserably. Before he could unleash his prime Buddhist artifact, a large blade had cut him into two halves from head to toe. Not allowing World Exalt's coffin to exercise any divine ability or flee, a huge mouth suddenly rushed out of the black mist and swallowed him whole. The horrible chewing noise lasted for a while the surrounding black mist grew thicker and thicker. Seeing World Exalt's coffin, who shared the same title as himself, die tragically, World Exalt's coffin could not help but cry out, "Evildoer, who are you? How did you break into my Mount Vulture? There is a formation constructed by Buddha himself outside the mountain. How did you get in?" A hoarse and deep voice slowly echoed out of the black mist, one that made one feel despair just by listening to it. "That formation is not bad at all. Unfortunately, it cannot stop us. I am Terminator, you may not know my name." Along with the heavy footsteps, an 18 feet tall being covered in black scales, with a body that looked exactly like a human, but his head was a clump of constantly changing black mist. From time to time, it would change into countless forms, including men, women, old, young, flowers, birds, insects, fishes, birds, and beasts. However, each form was twisted and ferocious, filled with endless fear, despair, and all sorts of other negative expressions. The world venerables of Coffin and dozens of other world venerables stared at Terminator's head in a daze. They stared at the ever-changing head as all of their minds were sucked in. Their bodies were stiff, and they didn't even have the strength to move. Terminator laughed in a low voice, didn't you want to see me? However, as long as they have committed a crime, or have sinned in their hearts, they will be killed by me, just like all of you. You shouldn't exist in this world. Just like my name, you should be annihilated in the end, and everything will return to nothingness. This is the ultimate Tao of this boundless void. An invisible saber was swung. A saber light flashed, and an world exalt was sliced into dozens of pieces without any resistance. In the Daoyuotian Tao Origin Palace, the 7 Buddhist ancestors who had just forced back He Ku and Qi Yen suddenly noticed Supremacy Dei, who had stood up from the ruins of the pavilion. What made them speechless was that he had his hair tied up in a bun, and he was wearing a Taoist robe. All these years, the 7 Buddhist ancestors had focused all of their efforts on the primordial spirits, and they had no extra energy to pay attention to other things. However, seeing Dei dressed like this, they almost instinctively swept their divine senses towards Gridrakota Mountain. At first glance, the mountain was still shining brightly, with auspicious light and Buddhist clouds shrouding the entire area. However, under the observation of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, through the layer of illusory Buddhist light and auspicious clouds, Great Spirit Vulture Mountain had already been enveloped by 3 strange auras. Furthermore, within those 3 auras, there was a faint blood-red light that shot up into the sky. How did they sneak in? Guarding Heart Buddha was furious. He angrily shouted at Dei's supremacy, "Dei, I will not pursue the crime of abandoning Buddhism and entering Taoism for now. Quickly follow us back to Gridrakota Mountain to save our people, and you can atone for your sins." They quickly put their palms together before the 9 Daozu, and the 7 Buddhist ancestors turned into a beam of auspicious light and flew towards Gridrakota Mountain. There were only 3 world breakers working together, and the 9 Daozu's power was enough to deal with them. Now, the biggest danger was Gridrakota Mountain. Even though the 7 Buddhist ancestors had cultivated their hearts to be like an ancient well, and their hearts were like stone, they still could not let go of this place. They could not let go of this place, and they could not let go of their loyal disciples. If it was the 9 Taoist patriarchs, they could abandon their disciples at a critical moment, but the 7 Buddhist patriarchs couldn't abandon their disciples so easily. The Buddhist cultivation method emphasized the power of faith the most, and most of the power of faith of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs came from their hardcore disciples. Dei's supremacy cursed and grunted a few times. He rolled his eyes and became a beam of light, following the 7 Buddhist ancestors. Lying in the ruins, his bones and meridians were all broken, and his organs were all crushed. Wu Qi, whose life was hanging by a thread, grunted as well. Chapter 1188. In Pan-Gu World, the stars were dim. Yuju's 9-headed serpent was confronting Daozu in Dao Yuan Palace, but there was still a hazy 9-headed serpent silhouette in the void, infecting the great Tao of heaven. As time went by, the 9-headed serpent became fainter and fainter, but the stars in Pan-Gu World became dim as well, as if there was a layer of mist covering the surface of these stars, devouring their light. Not only did the stars dim, even the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs had some problems with their understanding of the great Tao of heaven. The great Tao of heaven seemed to be mixed with impurities, and some things were no longer under their control. At least, the 9 Daozu who stayed in Dao Yuan Palace did not notice what Wu Qi was doing. He was carefully cutting a small piece of flesh from his finger. The piece of flesh, about the size of a bean and as thin as a cicada's wing, fell to the ground. Wu Qi's body vanished, and the piece of flesh had transformed into another Wu Qi. His limbs and bones were all broken, his dantian and meridians were smashed into pieces, and his internal organs were in a mess. Half of his heart was hanging near his left waist. With such a serious injury, Wu Qi was really dying, but no one paid attention to him. The 9 Daozu deliberately ignored Wu Qi's injury, and did not intend to help him at all. Those Tao patriarchs and gold immortals had just suffered a great loss from Qi Yan's attack, and were now defending themselves under the command of green-browed Daozu. None of them took a second glance at Wu Qi. As for Reverend Shouzhua, he was crying and screaming while lying in the ruins of a pavilion, struggling for his life. 20 to 30 of his ribs were broken, and 70 to 80 of his other bones were broken. 4 or 5 of his internal organs were shattered, and all the meridians in his body were broken into hundreds of pieces. When he fell to the ground, he punched himself in the forehead, causing his skull to sink 3 inches down. He looked as miserable as could be. He lay moaning in the ruins, accompanied by 3 golden immortals whose bodies he had smashed, but no one from the Tao sect came to his aid. Seeing the behavior of the people of Haotian Taoism, exalted Shouju shouted even louder. He closed his eyes and howled like a pig being slaughtered. Imperceptibly, those people paid less attention to Wu Qi. Everyone's attention was attracted by him. Just like that, Wu Qi slipped out of the realm beyond heaven without alerting anyone, leaving behind a hastily made clone to take the blame. As soon as he left the sky beyond heaven, his body blended into the starry sky. 30 to 50 stars flashed in the void, and Wu Qi had already come to the side of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, quietly following them. Originally, the escape art found in Scroll of Stealing was the most miraculous under the heaven, and after the trial in the 7 Saints' Palace, he had comprehended the Scroll of Stealing from it. The escape art found in the Scroll of Stealing allowed him to come and go without a trace, and he had cultivated it to the extreme. Brazenly following the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, he looked at them with a smile on his face as they rushed into the great Gridrakota mountain. As soon as they stepped into the mountain, Buddha Guarding Heart waved his sleeve and cried out, "Split up and rescue our disciples. There should be at least 3 world destroyers here, so be careful. Release all your divine wills, and don't let anyone sneak attack you." The mountain gate of Great Gridrakota Mountain was guarded by 108 layers of nested Buddhist formations, and there were more than 300 experts of Buddha realm stationed here as the eye of the formations. But at this moment, the 36 monasteries near the mountain gate, which served as the core of the grand formation, had been razed to the ground, and the ground was littered with the corpses of Buddhist cultivators. Their bald heads were rolling on the ground, and all of the heads had a huge hole between their eyebrows. Clearly, their natal relics had been dug out. This horrifying scene nearly caused the 7 Buddhas to cough up blood. They transformed into 7 beams of auspicious light and flew off into the distance. The Guardian Heart, the Guardian Will, and the Guardian Tongue Buddhas had the most profound cultivation bases, and they flew directly towards the core region that was enveloped by the demonic mist. The other 4 Buddhist patriarchs turned into wind and clouds to wash the entire Great Gridrakota Mountain. They gathered the surviving disciples and asked them what had happened. The Mountain Guard Formation was a series of nested formations that the 7 Buddhist patriarchs had spent a lot of effort to build. The power of 108 Buddhist formations was added together, and its defense was 100 times stronger than the original number 1 formation of the Buddhist League, the Vajra Revolving Formation. Even if the 7 Buddhist patriarchs worked together, they would not be able to break it. So, how did 5 world destroyers, who had not recovered their cultivation, sneak into Great Gridrakota Mountain? If they did not solve this problem, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs would not be able to eat or sleep. Guarding Tongue Buddha turned into a Buddha light and went to the acacia forest. His mind scanned the area, and he knew Tao Wu and his disciples were still alive. Buddha Guardian Tongue didn't have a good impression of Bai-en. After all, Bai-en cultivated the delightful Zen art, which went against the Buddhist Dharma passed down by Buddha Guardian Tongue's lineage. Guarding Tongue Buddha's name implied that he practiced the silent Zen, which was a test of a person's heart. Ever since he became a Buddha, he never spoke. He communicated with the other Buddhas through hand gestures. His Zen skills were about having the heart be like still water. In that endless silence, he searched for the secrets of heaven and earth. On the other hand, the delightful Zen technique was a secret technique of the Buddhist League that could devour the soul and melt the bones. Therefore, Buddha Guarding Tongue did not have a good impression of the delightful Zen technique, and even Lao Ai, who was lucky enough to inherit the delightful Zen sect, was disliked by him. But now, the blissful sect had lost all its elites. In the investiture of God's war, the blissful sect had suffered the most casualties among all the Buddhist sects, and Lao Ai had the rare physique of 9 dragons embracing jade pillar. In the blissful Zen art, his physique was top-notch. In just 100 years, with the help of the Buddhist cauldron, Tao Wu had broken through to the peak of the Tao reasoning level. He had just scanned Lao AI with his divine sense and found that this immoral young man had already broken through to the realm of Tao breaking, which showed that he was a rare genius of the Blissful sect. Perhaps the Buddhist League's Blissful sect would flourish because of him and become an important ally of the Buddhist League. Even if Tao Wu didn't like him, Buddha guarding tongue had to save such a talented man. That was especially true considering that Bai Hun was in grave danger. His Tao-breaking cultivation base was being devoured by a woman. The woman's energy was evil, which was unique to world breakers. Guarding tongue Buddha rushed to the acacia forest to save him. With his profound cultivation base, it took him just a breath of time to arrive above the acacia forest. He clasped his hands together, and a beam of Buddhist light sprinkled down. A deep and powerful Buddhist chant came from his abdomen, sounding like a lion's roar that shook the earth and the void. The Buddhist chant made Madman Shua and the other disciples of the happy Zen fainted. Tao Wu, who was twitching on the woman's body and was about to fall back to the Tao reasoning level from the Tao breaking level, shuddered. His eyes regained a trace of clarity, and suddenly, he let out a long cry. A faint dragon roar came from his lower body, and then 9 strange blood-red dragon-shaped beams shot out of his lower body and plunged into the woman's body. The woman was shaken by guarding tongue Buddha's Buddhist chant. She threw her head back and screamed, then slapped her palms toward Tao Wu's chest. However, Lao AI let out a strange laugh. Suddenly, 2 green lotus stems sprouted from his breasts. The green leaves bloomed one after another, and 2 pink lotus buds sprouted out from within. Right when the woman thrust her palms forward, the flower buds bloomed, and the woman's palms slammed hard onto the lotus. "Lady, your cultivation technique is amazing." Tao Wu's chest shone with a bright flame. His body trembled violently, and sticky blood gushed out of his 7 orifices. He hugged the woman tightly and shouted, "But I don't think there's a woman who can defeat me in bed. Buddha will be my witness, and today, I will kill you with my spear. I don't care if you are a senior immortal or a demon from another world, I will let you know that I am the only king in bed." Guarding tongue Buddha's facial muscles twitched violently. Witness? Buddha will be the witness? Is the Buddha so worthless to be a witness to your shady business? What do you think Buddha is? But the woman in front of him was a world breaker. As a witness. It seemed guarding tongue Buddha had no choice but to be the witness. Flustered and exasperated, Buddha guardian tongue descended from the sky. Just as Bai En and the woman were fighting, Buddha guardian tongue delivered a heavy kick to the top of the woman's head. A pure and vast Buddhist power blasted into the woman's body. Boundless golden light burst out of her body, and solemn Buddhist chants resounded through the clouds. The woman's body spasmed violently, and the demonic aura in her body was stirred up by the sneak attack of Buddha's serpent tongue. Her body suddenly stiffened, and she could not move. Tao Wu used all of his power. He was crazily plundering the vast and endless magic power inside the woman's body. This evil man was indeed worthy of being the number 1 in the brothel. With his extraordinary innate talent, he only needed to follow the mystic technique of the art of delightful Zen to open up all the acupoints in the girl's body at the same time, and a tremendous amount of magic power surged into Lao AI's body. Tao Wu's body twitched, and a flood of magic surged into his body. He was knocked out by that huge amount of magic. The woman also screamed. The Buddha power above her head was crazily attacking and destroying her body. Her lower body was being sucked by Tao Wu, and she could not move. Being attacked from above and below, the woman's eyes rolled back, and she was knocked out. Guarding tongue Buddha nodded happily. It looked like Tao Wu was going to suck out all of the woman's magic power. Were the Buddhists going to have another path integration level cultivator today? But this situation was a bit too ridiculous. If people found out that the 8th path integration level cultivator of the Buddhist sect had been promoted naked, it would damage the reputation of the Buddhist sect. Just as guarding tongue Buddha was thinking about how to deal with this situation, Wu Qi quietly appeared behind him. Glancing at Tao Wu, who was knocked out by the powerful magic power, Wu Qi shook his head. There was a flash of spiritual light, and a squarish brick that looked like it had been carved out of diamond shot out from Wu Qi's palm. This brick was engraved with countless dark patterns of wind and cloud, and within these patterns were huge cauldrons of all shapes and sizes. There were round cauldrons, square cauldrons, triangular cauldrons, tall cauldrons, short cauldrons, multi-layered cauldrons, three-legged cauldrons, four-legged cauldrons, and multi-legged cauldrons. This brick came from the seven sacred palace, and it was called the cauldron brick. It was an extremely powerful holy tool. It was a true offensive holy tool, not a supplementary one, and it definitely wasn't a projection like a primordial treasure. The cauldron brick shot out and smashed into the back of Guarding Tongue Buddha's head. Before the poor Guarding Tongue Buddha could see who had ambushed him, his vision had already turned black, and he was knocked unconscious. Tens of thousands of huge cauldrons of all shapes and sizes appeared on his natal relic. All of these cauldrons radiated intense light at the same time, suppressing his natal relic and divine sense to the point where they were unable to move. With a cold sneer, Wuchi pressed his palm against Guarding Tongue Buddha's back. He activated his thievery energy, and the Khanate spirit hidden within Guarding Tongue Buddha's body struggled violently, but it was forcibly extracted by the thievery energy. Chapter 1189. His body twitched violently, and his divine soul trembled madly in his sea of consciousness. He tried his best to control his natal relic, trying to break free of the billions of cauldrons and regain control of his body. But what Wuchi was controlling was a true divine artifact of the saint's realm, the brick cauldron. How could it be broken so easily? All of the cauldrons were made according to the everlasting law of the saint's realm. To the saint's realm, the everlasting law was equivalent to the highest heavenly Tao of Panga world. It was the core of all profound mysteries. Every single one of these cauldrons was different in design, and each contained the suppressive and stabilizing power of the cauldron. When billions of cauldrons were activated at the same time, even if Buddha Serpent's cultivation was twice as strong, he still wouldn't be able to break free. A 3-meter-long strand of light, shining with a strange light, emerged from the back of Buddha Serpent's head. Wuchi's thievery aura, which had fused perfectly with Wuchi's, boiled, causing Wuchi's blood energy to ripple madly. Wuchi felt as if his entire body was suddenly filled with mouths, and every single cell in his body seemed to have become an enormous empty stomach. Every single part of his body was emanating a frenzied desire to devour. The strand of light seemed to have sensed the frenzied desire to devour in Wuchi's heart. It trembled violently, then transformed into an extremely faint halo of light, intending to tear through the void and flee. But how could Wuchi allow the delicious food in his mouth to flee? He opened his mouth and sucked the halo of light into his mouth, instantly fusing with his limbs and bones. An intense feeling of pleasure, which he hadn't felt even when he was dual cultivating with Yi Xia, swept through his entire body. Just like Buddha Serpent, Wuchi's body twitched violently, and he stared blankly into the sky. His body gradually turned hazy and transparent, like a clump of aerosol that was slowly dissolving into the air. Everything felt like a dream, as countless illusions flashed through his soul. His body felt incredibly warm, as if he had returned to his mother's womb. He felt an indescribable sense of safety and comfort. His surroundings were pitch black. There was no light, no shadows. Nothing existed. This was an endless void, empty with nothing. There was no sun, moon, stars, light, heat, or ice. There was nothing. He didn't even have the concept of time and space. Everything was still in a state of nothingness. What kind of existence was he? Wuchi had sunk into this marvelous and inconceivable state. He was immersed in the comprehension of that strand of light. He was experiencing some marvelous experiences. He was asking himself what this place was, and what kind of existence was he? Why did he appear here? Why is there nothing around me? In the endless void, after an unknown period of time, when the concept of self was born, the first ocean since ancient times appeared in the void. The ripples of this spiritual sea were filled with magical and inconceivable power. It had a powerful divine power that could change everything. No one knew why this ocean was born. No one knew what kind of power it used to be born. However, Wuchi felt that self was immersed in this spiritual sea. Apart from self, there were many other existences around him that had the same origin. But everyone had different natures. For example, Self had a grand and majestic nature, and he had a natural liking for all kinds of spirits and souls. However, the few existences around him that had the same origin were either as hot as fire, as sharp as knives, or as heavy as rocks and mud. A strange light floated in the spiritual sea. Countless newborn, innate spirits were rippling on the surface of the water. These innate spirits were formless and immaterial. In the boundless darkness, they emitted an extremely faint spiritual light. They attracted each other, touched each other, and then fused or devoured each other. Innate spirits with similar natures would fuse and become stronger spirits, while spirits with repelling natures would fight and destroy each other. The result was that both sides would be destroyed at the same time. But it didn't matter. There were still countless newborn spirits being born in the spiritual sea. No matter how many were destroyed, there would be even more spirits joining the strange fusion and devouring process. After an unknown amount of time, Self had also fused with many spirits with similar natures. From an insignificant spiritual light that was thousands of times weaker than a firefly, Self became an extremely powerful spirit that was several zhang long and as thick as a thumb. Self also discovered that Self seemed to have a strange power that could secretly steal the power of other spirits to strengthen himself. There was no need to fuse with each other or devour others. As long as Self got close to them, he could absorb their power and silently strengthen himself. Self found a bright path to develop and strengthen. All the actions of the spirit came from instinct. Self immediately swept through the spiritual sea. No matter if they were newly born or had already grown to a certain extent, as long as there was a chance, Self would pounce on them and absorb their power. Some newborn spirits were destroyed after being absorbed, and some stronger spirits had their power stolen by Self and returned to being newborn spirits. Gradually, Self became one of the most powerful spirit gods in the entire spiritual sea. Just as he was prepared to assimilate the power of every other spirit or even the entire spirituality sea for his own, Mother and Terminus, two diametrically opposed entities that represented the power of growth and destruction respectively, erupted in the most terrible conflict since the birth of the spirituality sea. From Self's memory, Wuqi saw that on the sparkling spiritual sea, two enormous light dragons, whose diameters were immeasurably thick, and whose length could swallow tens of enormous stars, clashed against each other. Self was so scared back then. He didn't think that Mother and End had already become so powerful, especially when they not only clashed with their own powers, but also used the powers of all the spirits that belonged to them. That was an unprecedentedly violent collision in the boundless void, a direct collision of life and death, a head-on collision of creation and destruction, a tough collision of origin and end. The boundless sea of spirituality was destroyed in that collision, and only a small part of the wreckage was divided into countless small lakes of spirituality that scattered in all directions. The destruction of the ocean of spirit was so fast, and the speed at which the scattered spirit lakes were flying away was so astonishing. Wuqi roughly estimated, and from his memory, he could see that the speed at which the tiny lakes were dispersing was at least trillions of times faster than the divine ability of teleportation performed by a Tao-fusing expert. It was an unimaginable, absolute speed that approached the limit of the endless void. A small part of the spiritual sea was destroyed, and the vast majority of the spiritual sea was destroyed, giving birth to the most primordial nebula in the boundless void. From the nebula, countless stars were born, and thus, life began in the boundless void. This violent collision had also severely wounded Mother and End. The two main culprits who had destroyed the spiritual sea went into hiding to recuperate, and the boundless spirits that had dispersed from the spiritual sea attached themselves to the stars and other energy tides, finally beginning the process of endless life, reproduction, and destruction. He was the only one who had escaped that terrifying explosion. He carefully hid within the boundless sea of stars that had been born in the boundless void, stealing all types of energy to strengthen himself. Due to the fact that he could steal the energy of other spirits, his concealment techniques were unparalleled, and even Mother and End were unable to detect his presence. However, how could one not wet their shoes if they walked along the river? When he was strong enough to rival Mother and started another fierce competition with the holy world as their chessboard. The two spiritual gods had thrown all caution to the wind, using the last bit of their power before they fell into slumber to fight it out. In the end, the sacred world was destroyed, but he just happened to be swept into the core of the clash between the two ultimate powers. It was basically equivalent to receiving the combined attack of the two ultimate powers. Unfortunately, he was weakened to an extreme point. Helplessly, he attached himself to the remains of the holy world, drifting in the chaos along with the energy tides. After that, he was absorbed by the remains of the holy world, which was left by a powerful being in the holy world. He saw a muscular man luckily break a few seals of the holy world in a row, and take away a piece of breathing earth, a cultivation scripture, and a 10,000 spirit cauldron, which was made from a small piece of the spiritual sea. Unfortunately, Ji Hao was sucked into the 10,000 spirit cauldron. When the man named Pan Gu created a new world, Ji Hao possessed the first thread of thief power that was created by the creation of the world, and began drifting in Pan Gu world. Severely weakened, he had no choice but to wander around helplessly, until one day, he met a white rat demon, who had a pair of wings on his back. This white rat demon, who was born to be sneaky, actually attracted him, and he attached himself to him, earning himself a great reputation. However, this white rat demon was unlucky. He was hunted down by all the divine gods, and although he was killed, he, who had just recovered a little bit of his power, was helplessly sealed in a jade talisman. In the end, Wu Qi luckily found the jade talisman, inherited the white rat demon's scroll of stealing, and obtained the first thread of thieving energy. Originally, Wu Qi's fortune was limited, and the first thread of thieving energy could not be compared with his innate spirit. As long as he could obtain enough power from Wu Qi, he would be able to separate himself from the first thread of thieving energy, and once again start his happy life of stealing the power of natural spirits. But now, his target had changed. He was no longer those weak and pitiful spirits, but Mother and the two fellows who nearly destroyed him. As long as he could devour their power, this world formed by the endless void would become his. However, before he could recover much of his power, Wu Qi had obtained the legacy of the sacred realm, comprehended the holy energy, and was even lucky enough to transform it into the primordial creation. The holy energy of the sacred realm was, in fact, the specific manifestation of the divine energy, the source of the sea of spirit, in the human body. With the divine energy, Wu Qi had begun to merge perfectly with him. Today, he had become Wu Qi, and Wu Qi had become him. With a tremble of his body, Wu Qi suddenly appeared in the void. He breathed out a heavy sigh, chuckled, and said, "So, you are such an unlucky fellow." "So, I am so lucky. Does that mean I've perfectly merged with an innate spirit, and have truly reached the point of immortality?" With a smile on his face, Wu Qi pulled out a thread of light from the top of his head and said, "Wonderful. In that case, I can't waste these 16 spirits. I'll just devour half of the power of each spirit, and leave the rest for Zi Xian and the others." With a loud laugh, Wu Qi pressed his palm onto the lady's back. Her body trembled, and then all her spirit, energy, and soul were sucked away by Wu Qi like a tide. Chapter 1190. Hua Huang smiled sweetly, picked up the wine jar, and took a hearty sip. Pan Gu happily looked at the body, which had used many rare materials to create. He happily laughed and said, "Wonderful. This is really good. It is thanks to the 1,000 spirit cauldron's nourishment. Otherwise, how could it have such a spirit? This is good. If my true spirit combines with it, it will be no different from my own body." Therefore, the guarding feet Buddha used all of his god powers to become a stream of light. He traveled all over Big Spirit Vulture Mountain. His name was Guarding Feet. His sky feet god power was the #1 Buddha god power. He was good at all kinds of space techniques. As long as he was careful, he did not think any break world people could ambush him. Hua Huang clan stepped on a purple air and floated down. She landed next to Pan Gu. She smiled at Pan Gu and bowed. She quietly said, Big Brother Pan Gu, long time no see. Like a ghost, Wu Qi appeared on Big Spirit Vulture Mountain. He carefully ambushed one Buddha after another. All the attention of the Buddhist patriarchs was focused on the world destroyer, so no one noticed Wu Qi. In the end, even the most cautious Buddha, guarding Will, was knocked down by Wu Qi with a brick, and his innate spirit was quietly taken away by Wu Qi. In the deepest part of Yuxiong Plain's spirit cave, in a small world, Pan Gu was sitting under a tree. He was combing the fur of a cat that was sleeping in front of him. At the moment, Pan Gu was even more meticulous than the most meticulous woman. He combed the fur of the cat lying on the ground, almost one hair at a time. The cat was so comfortable that it had been purring in its sleep, drooling all over the ground. Wu Qi put his hand on the back of the guarding feet Buddha's head. The thief's spirit god power was activated. The guarding feet Buddha's spirit was extracted by Wu Qi. Quickly, Wu Qi suppressed the innate spirit in his body, then with a sway of his body, he disappeared amidst a vast expanse of grayish mist. Thank you for all these years. You deserve this. Pan Gu sat down under the tree with his legs crossed and took out a vat of wine from an unknown source. He smilingly pointed to a patch of green grass beside him and said, "This is the good wine I extorted from old Mu last time he came. Why don't you sit down and have a drink? Since you've come to see me, it must be because you've finished refining that item." While exercising his fists and feet, Pan Gu compressed his body with a divine ability. After a set of punches, his figure had already become not much different from an ordinary person. Although his height of 12 feet was majestic, it was not too eye-catching. The Wahuang clan smiled happily and said, "Big Brother's supernatural power has indeed reached a great height." Endless mysteries were tumbling in the Wahuang clan's sea of consciousness. Her divine soul was trying its best to fuse with these mysteries. She could clearly sense the benefits she had gained. Not only in terms of cultivation level, but even her magic power was rapidly improving. Her fingers and toes began shaking, followed by a series of bone-rubbing noises. His body, which was hundreds of meters tall, began to move slowly. His huge body floated in the air, and he casually performed a series of extremely simple punches. Punching, kicking, twisting his waist, every single move was very simple, but those simple punches revealed a primitive and barbaric aura. Every single move seemed to have incorporated the movements of countless giant beasts pouncing on their prey, and every single punch was at the peak of perfection, as if it was made by nature. While laughing out loud, Pan Gu waved his arms. 12 human head-sized purple spell symbols darted out from between his fingers and darted into the spot between the Wahuang clan's eyebrows along with a dazzling light. The Wahuang clan quivered, then a bright light spread out from her body. The sense of power released from her body skyrocketed, and within a blink of an eye, she broke through the first level of Dao fusing, which was generally accepted as the strongest in Pan Gu world, and stepped into an immeasurably mysterious level. The Wahuang clan sat down smilingly, took over the wine vat, and took a long sip. Putting down the wine vat, the Wahuang clan nodded and said, "It is done." With the living soil as the foundation, the holy materials that Big Brother got from the ancient holy palace, and the essence of the 5 elements, plus the 1,000 spirit cauldrons years of refining, the item is done. Pan Gu did not have time to deal with the cat. He stood up and bowed to the Wahuang clan. He laughed and said, "Sister Nuwa, it has been a long time. Hee, you've been working outside all these years." Pangu Sha didn't go on purpose. On Lingjiu Mountain, the guardian Buddha was carefully turning into a beam of light, traveling through the mountains. Aside from the 3 world breakers that had been discovered by the 7 Buddhas, there had to be other world breakers hiding in the dark. The 7 Buddhas, who had visited the 7 holy palace, knew about the demonic powers of the world breakers. They were scary monsters that could kill them if they were not careful. With no other choice, Wahuang hastily waved her hands. A large swath of talismans absorbed powerful purple spiritual energy and set up a small spatial restriction around her. When the airwaves blew past the restriction, they were carried elsewhere. Only then did she manage to steady herself amidst the endless waves of air. The light screen showed the scene of Lingjiu Mountain. Zhongning was slowly killing the Buddha and Bodhisattva next to her. At this moment, the Huang clan was confident that even if the three Daozu and the Buddhas worked together, they would not be able to defeat her. Given time, when she completely digested the mystery that Pan Gu sent her, she believed she could easily suppress the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists. From time to time, the pores on his body would spray out white waves of air. This was the purple spiritual energy that was absorbed, purified, compressed, and stored in his body. However, some of the impurities in the purple spiritual energy would turn into white waves of air and be expelled from his body. The Huang clan's restriction was hit by a few air waves. The restriction was broken. The Huang clan was almost blown away by the air waves. Pan Gu was silent for a while. He finally laughed and said, "Let the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists deal with these problems. They want to control the sky laws of this world. They must pay the price." When they were trying to become gods, everything was fated. They were fated to be our vanguard against the world breakers. 2 strong lights came out of her slightly opened eyelids. The giant body opened its mouth and laughed. "Not bad. It is a bit rusty. After a few days, you will be able to use it. It is amazing. It is many times stronger than my real body. I am afraid that if the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists use their life treasures to attack this body, they will only be able to hurt the body. They will not be able to hurt the foundation." A heavy heartbeat rang out continuously. Every heartbeat was like a clap of thunder streaking across the void. With the power of the Huang clan, when the heartbeat of the body started to recover, she had to cover her ears. She quickly set up dozens of restrictions around her. The muscles in his abdomen began to squirm slightly. This was a sign that his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were operating normally. The loud sound of the intestines kept ringing. It was like thunder exploding. The Huang clan was happy and said, "This is good. Big brother, with this body, you will have more confidence in dealing with the world breakers." The blood vessels started to move. The chi meridians were working again. The body began to breathe heavily, and every breath it took would create a violent hurricane in the small world. Thousands of tornadoes rose around. The purple spirit air turned into many big and small purple cyclones. The giant nose sucked them in. Guarding feet, Buddha grunted. His body stumbled forward a few steps and fell flat on his face. Countless illusions of the cauldron circled around his head. Just like the guardian tongue Buddha, the guardian foot Buddha's natal relic and divine soul were also suppressed by the cauldron brick. Not only could he not move his body, but he had also lost all sense of the outside world. The Huang clan smiled as she watched the slow movements of the body. She kept nodding and saying, "How is the soul and the body working together? Can you control this body?" His God sense was like a big net that spread out everywhere. He was looking for the world breaker. Guarding Buddha did not notice that behind him, there was a shadow that was not moving. Wu Qi followed closely behind the guarding feet Buddha. He slowly raised the cauldron brick and slapped the back of the guarding feet Buddha's head. The Huang clan smiled a little reservedly. This body was formed with countless rare materials, including the living soil, and it took dozens of eons to be nurtured by the myriad spirit cauldron. If it did not have enough power, how could it be worthy of her years of hard work? The Huang clan even felt that this body was the highest achievement she had ever made in crafting, and she would never have such a powerful and wonderful work in the future. When the congenital spirits of the 7 Buddhas were extracted by Wu Qi, the Huang clan left a clone to guard the Empress Hua Palace, while she quietly left the sky beyond heaven, turned into a beam of light, and flew toward Yuxiong Plain. Without alerting the generals of Xian dynasty in Liangzhu, she quietly sneaked into the spirit cave under Yuxiong Plain, and kept going deeper and deeper. Twisting his waist, he sighed and said, "The best choice would have been to transform Pangu continent back into my true form, so that my fleshly body could really exert the full power of my true spirit. But, if I destroy Pangu continent, what will happen to the people of the human race? I have no choice but to replace them with this fleshly body. But, Sister Nua's divine power is boundless, and the benefits of this fleshly body are far beyond my expectation. After stretching his body, he waved his palm in front of him, and a screen of light appeared in front of him. Pangu smilingly raised his head, grabbed the cat's head, and threw it away. He did not know what was going on around him, and the sleeping cat bumped its head against a tree. The pain made it howl furiously, and its long hair stood up one after another. Flustered and exasperated, it waved its arms and grunted at Pangu. Gently patting the top of his head, an auspicious cloud rose from the top of his head. Amidst thunderous rumbles, the myriad spirit cauldron, the origin spirit treasure of Pangu world, slowly rose from the top of the Wahwang clan's head. A beam of earthy yellow divine light rushed out from within the myriad spirit cauldron, wrapping around a burly man who was over 1,000 feet tall and had a muscular body. The face of the man was exactly the same as Pangu's, and even the aura he emanated was the same. The Wahwang clan just smiled and looked at Pangu quietly. Pangu sprung up, transformed into a purple torrent, and plunged into the man's forehead. The entire small world began to tremble violently. Inexhaustible amounts of purple spiritual energy kept rolling and surging towards the magnificent body. As the spiritual energy continued to pour into the body, a heavy sound of water ripples rang out from within the body. That was the sound of the blood in the blood vessels beginning to flow. The sound of the blood that had been condensed to the extreme was like the sound of ocean waves when it surged. Chapter 1191. The moment Pangu's true spirit and the body combined, the sky of Pangu's world changed. If the sky of Pangu's world was as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, then now, the sky of Pangu's world had become as difficult as calculus. And the difficulty kept increasing. At the same time, it was like a withered skeleton that was suddenly injected with a powerful life force. All the skeletons began to grow new flesh, and the bones became plump and beautiful. Pangu's sky of Pangu's world became more complicated, richer, and more profound. Moreover, the types of heavenly Tao laws were also quietly increasing. For example, there were originally only the acquired 5 elemental laws, but now the innate 5 elemental laws, the acquired 5 elemental laws, and the positive and negative 5 elemental laws were gradually merging into the vast heavenly Tao system. Inside Dao Yuan Palace, the 9 Daozu had formed a 3x3 big formation to fight against the 3 break world people. Yu Ju had transformed into a 9-headed serpent. Black skeleton and red mantis were standing on his head. Black smoke rose into the sky, and a black mist filled the air. Inside the mist was a giant red evil power. The 9 Daozu were in groups of 3. 3 were on the ground, 3 were in the air, and 3 were in the sky. The distance between them was the same. They surrounded the 3 break world people like a ball. The 9 Daozu's powers combined into one. They moved smoothly and smoothly. It was like a Jin Dan. There was no mistake. 9 colored lotuses kept flying out of the Daozu's bodies. They formed a giant lotus throne that danced in the sky. Every lotus petal was as sharp as a knife. They released beams of light that surrounded Yu Ju and the other 2 break world people. Yu Ju raised his head to the sky and roared. Thick black smoke rolled out in all directions. But the 9 Daozu combined their powers together. How could he fight against that kind of power? Wherever the halo of the lotus throne passed, the black chi was shattered. Yu Ju howled miserably as 3 of his heads were cut off. Stinky black blood spurted up into the sky, splashing all over Black Skeleton and Chi Yen. Black Skull and Red Mantis cursed angrily. Black evil light shot out of the 7 orifices of the Black Skull in Black Skull's hand at the same time. 7 beams of evil light shot through the air like poisonous pythons, trying to fix the top of Daozu's head. However, there were countless lotus flowers dancing in the air, an immortal light and clear mist sweeping across the void. The 7 evil beams had only flown less than 100 feet away when they quietly melted in the immortal light. Chi Mantis opened her mouth and swallowed the 2 hearts floating beside her. Her left chest began to beat violently, and the dull sound of her heartbeat resounded throughout the world. She stared at red-browed Daozu, who had a pair of scarlet eyebrows. She made a hand gesture and screamed at red-browed Daozu, who was holding a long sword with a green edge. Red brows Daozu frowned. Suddenly, a drop of blood flew out of his mouth corner. His left chest suddenly jumped a foot high. He had already reached the peak of Pan Gu world, but still, his heart was nearly blown up by Chi Mantis' evil magic. Daozu was enraged. He wielded the long sword and released a stream of divine light that transformed into a 10,000 miles long gust of wind, silently blowing towards Chi Mantis. Wherever the faint cyan-colored gust of wind swept across, the space was shattered. Yu Ju let out another miserable howl. Another 5 of his heads were chopped off. The heads were minced into mush. The originally sinister and terrifying 9-headed python was now only left with a pitiful head. He roared furiously, then opened his mouth and gave a resonant roar towards the sky. In the air, hundreds of dim stars, which had been releasing a faint black mist, suddenly shone brightly. The black starlight transformed into fierce bolts of lightning and dazzled down from the sky. The 9 Daozu didn't manage to react timely. Their bodies were struck by the mutated star power, and the 3-in-3 great formation was nearly shaken. Purple brows Daozu was shocked. What a monster! When did you touch the great Tao of nature? How can you control the star power? With a soft snort, Violet Brow Daofather casually released a lightning seal into the skies. The hundreds of stars which Netherju was controlling all exploded. Aside from the quintessence at their core, which remained unharmed, the rest of the stars were all blasted into smithereens. In the celestial court, hundreds of celestial kings, who had been surrounding the prison, suddenly fell to the ground with blood spurting out from their eyes, ears, noses, and mouths. With a slight strike, Purple Brows Daozu damaged their spirit stars. These celestial kings, who had merged their souls with their stars, suffered severe injuries immediately. Unless the original cores of their spirit stars could absorb natural powers and rebuild their stars, these celestial kings would never be able to wake up again. Yu Ju said in shock, "Old Taoist, you sure are vicious. Ha, ha, destroying the stars of your own world." Back then, even the supreme experts of the Saints' world only used something like this when the Saints' world was destroyed to fight us to the death. You can actually do something like this now? Purple brows Daozu smiled proudly. These stars and celestial kings were just tools for them to control the great Tao of nature. Now that Yu Ju had touched the great Tao of nature, he could actually use the power of the stars to attack him. What use were these uncontrollable tools for? Let alone a few hundred stars, if Yu Ju could touch the stars of 1,080,000 celestial kings, Purple Brows Daozu would destroy all of them without any hesitation. With a cold snort, the 9 Tao patriarchs sat cross-legged in the void at the same time, their hands rapidly changing the incantation gesture. Accompanied by a deep and abstruse incantation, the tens of thousands of lotus thrones in the void suddenly merged inwards, and a huge lotus throne made of millions of lotus petals appeared in the sky, emitting 9-colored spirit light at the same time. It was a giant lotus seat made of millions of lotus petals. Every petal of the lotus seat was covered in Tao demon suppression spells. There were all kinds of powerful spells. All the spells were put together to create a scary big formation that made people's scalps go numb. Earth, water, fire, and wind, 4 different colors, came out of the lotus seat. The scary energy wave became a giant fist. It suddenly separated and turned into 3 glowing light fists that were the size of a normal person's fist. They came out quickly. The 3 world breakers saw this weird attack. They wanted to avoid it, but the space around them was completely locked. No matter how hard they tried, they could not break the space lock. The 3 glowing fists gently landed on the bodies of the 3 of them. Yu Ju's half-body was shattered. Only his head was left. He was dragging Lang Yi's body that was a few hundred feet long. He was struggling on the ground. Black Skeleton and Qi Yan were both punched in the chest. Their chests turned into nothingness, and the 4 elemental energies of earth, water, fire, and wind turned into countless blades that twisted in their bodies. The 2 of them howled miserably, and before the blades could reach their heads, they swung their palms at their necks at the same time. 2 heads flew into the sky. The 2 women's heads used the blood light to escape, but the space around them was locked down. They could only run around within a radius of a few dozen feet. They could not escape. Awesome! Quickly suppress them. The 9 Tao ancestors laughed in unison. The 3-in-3 formation was a supreme formation of the Tao sect that the 9 Tao ancestors had painstakingly studied. They had originally planned to use it together with the Celestial Court's great formation of Chaos Heaven to deal with the 7 Buddha ancestors, but now that they had tried it, the effect was not bad. Being able to suppress 3 world breakers was a good thing. He just needed to get rid of the break world scourges and suppress the 7 Buddha. Then, he could find their original spirits in the sky path and kill them. Then, he could refine his body's natural spirits. That way, he would truly be undying and holy. Just as the 9 Daozu laughed and the 3 world breakers roared unwillingly, the change brought about by the merging of Pangu's spirit and body happened. The whole Pangu world began to tremble slightly. A strange light began to flash in the sky, and a strong wind swept across the void. Whether it was the stars in the outer heavens, Pangu continent, the 33 heavens, Vulture Mountain, or even the Wawang clan's sky upon heaven, a strong wind full of natural energy was blowing. The great Tao of heaven operated, and the stars in the void began to slide uncontrollably. The familiar Big Dipper, the 6 Southern Dipper, the 7 glorious stars, the 9 cardinal stars, and even the 28 mansions slowly changed their positions in the sky. The array of stars in the sky became chaotic. The positions of all the stars changed, and so did their power. Wherever the wind passed, the power of the great Tao of Pangu world underwent an incredible change. It became more complicated, more profound, more magnificent, and more unpredictable. Sensing the cheers of the natural energy around them, the faces of the 9 Daozu turned extremely unsightly. Quick! Purple-browed Daozu cried out. A beam of purple immortal light shone from the top of his head, and the investiture of the gods, which was used to confer deities, rushed out along with streams of immortal music. Along with a few cracking sounds, a few tiny cracks appeared on the investiture of the gods. Obviously, the transformation of the great Tao and the positions of the stars had caused it a lot of damage. The 9 Daozu roared in unison. Daozu pulled out his whip and lashed it heavily on the investiture of the gods. All gods, listen to my command. Return to your original positions and operate the God-conferring formation to suppress the operation of the great Tao. Before the gods of the 3 worlds could react, the transformation of the great Tao was completed. The great Tao, which was thousands of times more complicated than before, began to control the operation of Pangu world. The worst-case scenario that the Tao ancestors were worried about did not happen. The deities they had conferred still retained their divine powers. Furthermore, as the laws of the heavenly Tao strengthened, the power of these deities also increased by hundreds of times. Even the stars in the sky, when these stars changed their positions and formed new star patterns, the powers of these stars soared by hundreds of times. Yu Ju, who had been controlling the great Tao of the great Tao, gave a deep growl, then his enormous body suddenly began squirming. The constellation of the Big Dipper, which had been formed from 42 other stars, suddenly dimmed. 49 streaks of pitch-black starlight howled downwards from the skies, striking accurately onto the head of the flabbergasted Tao Father Longbrows. This time, the astral attack was more than 1,000 times more powerful than the previous one, and all of the attacks were concentrated on the Tao Father's head. The Tao Father let out an agonized howl as he was immediately knocked to the ground by the astral attacks, black smoke rising from his body. This terrifying strike heavily injured the long-browed Tao Father's body. A spirit that glowed with a strange light floated out from within the Tao Father's body. The faces of the 3 break world people changed. The 3 of them shouted at the same time, a pre-born spirit. An immortal seed. How can you have something like that? Endless greed made the eyes of the 3 break world people turn red. They all jumped at Daozu. They did not care about anything else as they jumped at Daozu. Chapter 1192. Yu Ju had a great divine power that could infect the heavenly Tao, but his magic power and secret techniques were only ordinary. Black Skeleton used her natal vital energy in this attack, so it was shockingly powerful. Ju howled miserably. His head was pierced through by the lightsaber. The powerful penetrating force sent his body flying up into the sky. The black wind and starlight he brought along were like a storm as they smashed onto the primordial Tao Palace. The innate spirit, the origin of all things, the origin of all things, the power that stood on equal footing with Mother and End, the two great spirit gods who ruled the endless void. As long as he absorbed this innate spirit, comprehended its profound mysteries, and completely merged with its power, he would be able to truly transcend the mortal realm, and become truly immortal and indestructible. All cultivators below the Tao integration stage were ants. In fact, they couldn't even be considered ants. At the same time, inside the great vulture mountain, Ju and Bai En, who were slaughtering without restraint, froze. They raised their heads and sniffled. All of a sudden, they let out thunderous roars of disbelief, turned into two beams of bright light, and charged in the direction of the celestial of absolute heaven. Just as Red Mantis's hand was about to touch the innate spirit, a loud sword cry suddenly came from the void. Ju floated in the sky, his hands pointing at the stars in the sky. Tens of thousands of stars were exploding with blinding light as his fingers trembled. Black starlight whistled down from the sky. Thousands of feet above the ground, the original star power of tens of thousands of stars condensed into a 3-foot-long, strange-looking sawtooth short sword. Even a world breaker didn't want to be killed. As long as she had this innate spirit, Red Mantis would no longer be afraid of End. She would live freely and destroy everything she wanted to destroy. The 7 Buddhas had been knocked down by Wuqi's brick cauldron, so no one in the Great Vulture Mountain could stop Ju. He smoothly rushed out of the Great Vulture Mountain and appeared outside the Daluotian Palace in a few flashes. The hundreds of high-level Dao sect immortals guarding the door didn't even see Ju. He smoothly broke into the Dao Origin Palace. The blade was densely covered in sawtooth, and the blade was covered in fine poisonous thorns. The short sword with a pale green light fell from the sky and stabbed into Red Mantis's back. Red Mantis howled miserably. Her finger abruptly stopped less than half an inch away from the spirit. Her body was instantly destroyed by the terrifying star power and the evil power and killing intent contained in it. Her beautiful body suddenly exploded into countless tiny light spots that drifted away. The 8 Tao ancestors didn't use any mystical sorcery. They just used their purest power. 8 streams of power merged into one. Brutal, domineering, and unreasonable, they relied on absolute power to destroy the black skeleton's body. Black gusts of wind rolled up countless fist-sized black stars and fell from the sky. Ju gave a shrill scream and grabbed the slowly floating innate spirit with both hands. But before Ju could even reach the long-browed Tao Father, his clone exploded. An extremely thin crack appeared in the center of the black skeleton's forehead, and then a blade of light that was countless times thinner than a cicada's wing shot out from that crack, accurately striking Ju's forehead. Green Mantis Daozu didn't have time to help Daozu up. Instead, he fiercely slapped his own chest. Tens of 3 feet and 6 inches long spirit talismans flashed around him. A heart-wrenching vomiting sound came. Green Mantis Daozu opened his mouth and vomited. Then, countless cracking sounds could be heard, and a black sarcoma was unwillingly ejected out of Green Mantis Daozu's mouth. Countless thumb-sized tendons and blood vessels were attached to the sarcoma, and those broken tendons and blood vessels even brought out a few large chunks of purple-gold flesh. Red Mantis also didn't hesitate to consume her spirit power. Her body had already recovered. She was like a venomous serpent in the grass, soundless and undetectable as she quickly approached the long-browed Tao Father. She reached out her hand and grabbed that spirit in ecstasy. Her eyes were even sparkling with tears. A black stream of devil power also rose into the sky. Red Mantis angrily screamed, Ju, you have to pay the price, you have to pay the price. You have to die. You will die under the cruelest punishment. You will suffer endless pain for the rest of your life. You will never be free. In the void, Ju's true body, which had been affected by the great Tao of nature, quickly shrank. His gigantic body, which had covered hundreds of star areas, shrunk to around 1 mile long. It was a pitch-black, scaleless, 9-headed serpent. Soon after, a stream of black smoke spurted out from thousands of faintly black stars in the sky. The black smoke circled around Yuju, and Yuju had already turned into a tall and skinny dark-skinned man. Yuju let out a long, dragon-like roar. His body spun rapidly. Tens of thousands of stars under his control kept spurting out starlight, which turned into a rain of swords. His target was not only the 9 Daozu, Black Skeleton and Red Mantis were also covered by the rain of swords. Yuju roared hoarsely, "Shut up, you two bitches. Even if I have to die, I will get it. Innate spirit, I must get it. Whoever dares to stop me, die." Terminator roared crazily. The black smoke around his head changed rapidly. Within a blink of an eye, it had turned into tens of thousands of different faces. At this moment, Terminator's aura was extremely violent. It was like a ball of fire, burning a pitch-black tunnel in the void. The 8 Daozu had just launched a joint attack. They had never thought that Black Skeleton would launch such a desperate counterattack. Especially Lu Daozu, who had the deepest relationship with Long Eyebrow Daozu, was bending down to help Long Eyebrow Daozu. But in the end, the black skull rushed into Lu Daozu's back along with countless long, ghastly howls. Lu Daozu's body stiffened. Suddenly, a thumb-sized lump of flesh swelled up between his eyebrows. The black lump of flesh wriggled rapidly and turned into a vivid ghost face. A stream of black devil energy shot out from Black Skeleton's shattered body. She cursed the 8 Daozu, cursing them to have their souls destroyed, never to be reincarnated again. As she cursed, sticky black water vapor appeared out of thin air, condensed into 8 black skulls, and rushed toward the hearts of the Daozu. The devil energy transformed from Black Skeleton's natal spirit, Yuan Ling, kept spurting out wisps of stinky liquid. That was the strongest and most vicious curse she had cast by burning her natal spirit essence. Thousands of Dao sect elite disciples were badly battered by the starlight, and several great sect masters were pierced by the starlight rolled up by Yuju. The Dao sect elites in the Dao Yuan Palace were either dead or wounded, and their wails rose into the sky. In the face of Yuju's starlight attack, which was at the peak of the Dao integration realm, the Dao breaking realm and Dao reasoning realm immortals were so fragile. What a vicious method. Lu Daozu turned his head and glared at Black Skeleton's natal spirit, Yuan Ling. He drew a talisman and was about to suppress Black Skeleton. Except for Daozu, who was still unconscious after being beaten for a long time, the other 8 Daozu bellowed furiously in unison. The 9 Dao ancestors were of the same breath and branch. With so many years of friendship here, how could they allow the Black Skeleton to snatch away the long-browed Dao ancestors' opportunity to transcend mortality and enter sainthood? 8 Daozu coughed up a mouthful of purple blood essence at the same time, dipped their fingers in the blood, and drew a profound rune in the air, then sent it flying toward Black Skeleton. At the same time, a few plumes of dark smoke rose into the sky from Pangu Continent and Mount Gridrakota, rushing toward the Daoyuotian army. The other few Dao patriarchs also suffered a great loss under the curse of the Black Skeleton. They spat out a few mouthfuls of stinking, dark blood, then angrily cast their talismans and threw them at the Black Skeleton. But, these Daozu did not notice that Red Mantis, who was knocked flying away by Black Skeleton's breath just now, was already baring her teeth and pouncing on Daozu. Black Skeleton's body froze as an invisible, terrible pressure pressed down on her, making her bones creak. Puff! Puff! All her bones, meridians, muscles, and blood vessels exploded at the same time, from the base of her thighs to her toes. The unstoppable pressure crushed her body. A deafening boom rang out as Black Skeleton's body disintegrated, and her head and internal organs exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood. Purple clouds gathered together, and a strong, sticky pressure came sweeping over from all directions. For a moment, Yuju, Black Skeleton, and Red Mantis could not move. Letting out a shrill howl, Black Skeleton opened his mouth and spat out a stream of black smoke, sending Red Mantis, who also only had a head left, flying away. However, before Black Skeleton could get close to Long Eyebrow's spirit, Yuju's heavy body had already smashed down, smashing half of Black Skeleton's head. Without a doubt, when the End woke up from its long sleep, when the breakers destroyed everything they could see, the End would certainly kill the breakers themselves. Because the meaning of the End's existence was to wipe out everything, destroy everything, destroy everything. Naturally, the targets of its destruction included the breakers created by it. Yuju was sent flying away, while Black Skeleton pounced on the spirit, with her eyes fixed on it. She screamed hoarsely, "The pre-world spirit, the beginning of all things, the seed of immortality, the opportunity of transcendence. You will all die. Whoever dares to compete with me will die." A weird bone and flesh grating noise came from Black Skeleton's head. Countless strands of flesh spurted out from her broken neck and quickly formed a new body. Black Skeleton didn't hesitate to use her life blood essence to restore her fleshly body, just to fight for Daozu's spirit. The 8 Dao ancestors let out a long roar in unison. The long-eyebrowed Dao ancestor was unable to move for a long while due to the sneak attack. The 8 Dao ancestors occupied the positions of the 8 trigrams, and simultaneously took out a purple handkerchief embroidered with 8 trigrams and Tai Chi patterns from their sleeves and threw it into the sky. 8 handkerchiefs flew out and turned into layers of purple clouds that enveloped the entire palace of Dao origin. Purple Daozu gritted his teeth and sneered, "How dare you? Do you think you can covet a spirit item of this level? You evil cultivators, you should all die." At almost the same time, Bai Hen and End rushed to the entrance of the Daoyuotian Palace. Seeing the high-level immortals in front of the door, he waved his saber, and a sharp saber light stayed in the void for a quarter of an hour, trapping all the immortals within it. After a quarter of an hour, the saber light collapsed, and hundreds of high-level immortals, including 7 Dao-breaking great all-embracing golden immortals, died at the same time. Even the End, who created 13 breakers, could not kill a breaker who had fused with a spirit. Chapter 1193. Zhou Ying and the other world breakers went from Spirit Vulture Mountain to Dao Yuan Palace. Something big happened outside the Sky Prison. Sha Tu, Yang Xiao, Bai Xia, and Nether Jia, who had been imprisoned by Princess Zhang Lu and Qixia with mystic arts, looked up at the same time. Their noses twitched as they laughed wildly and said, "It's the smell of spirit. With it, what do I have to be afraid of?" White Sea Lion and Hell Scale's bodies spewed out black and white flames. One of the flames was dirty, and the other was full of destructive power. The 2 types of flames shot into the sky. They broke the restrictions that Princess Zhanglu had used to imprison them. Sha Tu and Yang Gue coughed up 9 mouthfuls of blood. They did not care about their own life force to cast a secret technique to escape the restrictions. After the 4 of them were imprisoned, the 6 Sky Kings angrily ran in front of Princess Zhanglu. They wanted Princess Zhanglu and Yi Xia to give control of the 4 to the Celestial Court. Not long after, the Celestial Court's Sky Kings coughed up blood. The sky rules suddenly changed. The stars in the sky all moved. All kinds of weird things were happening. Everyone was frozen. No one noticed the 4 Break World people that had been locked up. At this moment, the 4 Break World breakers did not care about their own life force to cast a secret technique to escape. They were like sharks that smelled blood. They screamed and flew into the sky. They went straight for the Daoyuotian Dao Yuan Palace. The speed at which the 4 of them flew was so fast that their bodies tore through the void, leaving behind glaring black marks in the air. Everyone was shocked by Chi-Chi. They did not know what had gotten into the Break World breakers to do something so weird. Princess Zhanglu and Yi Xia angrily screamed. They took Gold Feather, Silver Feather, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn with them to go after the Daoyuotian. The 6 heavenly emperors saw that the situation was getting weirder and weirder. They looked at each other. Chi-Chi let out a war cry and led the mighty army of the Celestial Court towards the primordial Dao Palace. No matter what happened, if it could make a Break World person so excited and crazy, it had to be a rare treasure. Perhaps he could get the treasure if he fished in troubled waters. The 6 Sky Kings were full of respect for the path Alpha, but the rare treasures of the sky and earth belonged to those who were virtuous. The 6 Sky Kings thought he was virtuous. Perhaps the treasure would fall into his hands. On Pangu continent, Ao Buzan was leading the righteous gods of 5 elements to hunt down the members of the forbidden clans. He had annihilated tens of millions of shaman army with a dirty and shameless move. Under Wu Xian's lead, the forbidden clansmen stood in formation to confront Ao Buzan. But when Ao Buzan released Wu Chang and the other 8,000 undead soldiers, Wu Xian immediately turned and fled with the forbidden clansmen. How could Ao Buzan let go of these grotesque monsters who were cruel and vicious? He immediately led the army and killed all the mountain gods and earth gods who were hiding the truth along the way. Everyone's Yuan Ling was taken to the celestial court by the divine generals of the celestial court. These god spirits that betrayed the celestial heavens wouldn't allow them to reform their god bodies. The only outcome that awaited them was to walk on god execution stage. Their primordial spirit would be slain, their god positions would be stripped, and their souls would be scattered. They wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Along the way, both sides traveled at great speed. Soon, the forbidden clansmen had reached the edge of southern region. Just when Ao Buzan had caught up with Wu Xian, a deafening rumble rang out in front of him. A plume of black smoke with a strong stench, wrapped in a few beams of black light, shot into the sky. He could only watch helplessly as the forbidden clansmen flew toward the Daluotian palace of Dao origin. As the black smoke sped along the way, shrill cries could be heard coming from it, the smell of spirit. It's the smell of spirit. I must get it. It's mine, and it can only be mine. At the same time, they kept spraying out poisonous flames and evil auras to attack each other. Clearly, they were trying to delay the forbidden clansmen so that they could get to the palace of Dao origin faster. Ao Buzan's eyes darted from side to side. He let out a long roar and ordered the 5 elements god to lead his divine weapons to continue the pursuit of the forbidden clansmen. Meanwhile, he rushed into the sky with Lord Xiansheng and the others, chasing after the black smoke toward the palace of Dao origin. The aura of the black smoke was very strange. Ao Buzan recognized that they were all world breakers. How could he, Ao Buzan, not get his hands on a treasure that could make a world breaker so tempted? Almost at the same time, all parties rushed outside the Daluotian palace and into the Daluotian palace. The poor Taoists guarding the Daluotian palace were badly beaten, and all of them were violently wiped out in an instant. Not even a wisp of their soul could escape. Countless strands of natural energies surged wildly inside the Daluotian palace like trillions of crazy poisonous pythons tangling and strangling each other. The raging energy completely destroyed everything inside the Daluotian palace. Countless restrictive spells in the palace of Dao origin exploded at the same time, and the Daoist Right Temple, the supreme blessed land of Dao League, collapsed once again. Beautiful jade, gemstones, and other building materials were shot out in all directions like powerful bows, hitting the disciples who had fled far away and making them bleed. Even the bodies of several sect masters were smashed by the debris of the palace, and they had no choice but to flee with their immortal souls. Soon, the situation inside the Daluotian palace became clear. 8 Daozu had formed an 8 trigrams formation, protecting Daozu, who was shaking his head and constantly swallowing immortal pills to heal his wounds. A spirit light flashed above Daozu's head. Daozu, who had just woken up, didn't have time to take this spirit back into his body. Except for Shi Yang, who had been sucked dry by Wu Qi, the rest of the 13 world breakers were all here. They stood loosely together, cautiously keeping a distance of about 30 meters from each other. They were greedily staring at the spirit above Daozu's head. Although they had been partners for many years, in the face of this supreme temptation, they instinctively showed fear and vigilance toward each other. Princess Zhang Li's group met up with Ao Buzan's group smoothly. They gathered together, and each of them released an aura no weaker than a Dao-fusing cultivator. Ninetails, the strange-looking nine-tailed scorpion, was circling around them almost crazily, its 4 big pincers clashing against each other. Ninetail's saliva sprayed hundreds of meters away, and its mind was constantly attacking Princess Zhang Li. So many delicious things. Eat them, eat them, eat them. The aura released by Ninetails was no weaker than any Dao-fusing cultivator, but its intelligence was still equivalent to that of an ordinary 3 or 5-year-old child. His every move was based on instinct. All he wanted to do was eat all the living beings in front of him, including Dao Father Nine-tailed. Their bodies all smelled so sweet and delicious, and were filled with temptation. The 6 celestial emperors formed the great chaos heaven formation with countless divine soldiers and heavenly generals, guarding on the side. Normally, the 6 celestial emperors should stand behind Daozu and listen to his orders. However, when the 6 celestial emperors saw the spirit above Daozu's head, they used the excuse that the great chaos heaven formation was too big and stayed far away from the 9 Daozu. Daozu seemed to have seen through some of the celestial emperor's plans, and they couldn't help but sigh at the same time. If these 6 celestial emperors hadn't been conferred as gods, if they were still immortals of the Dao sect, they would undoubtedly stand firmly behind their master. However, it was because they were conferred as celestial emperors that their divine bodies had replaced their immortal bodies, and their cultivation had disappeared. Their 7 emotions and 6 desires had taken control of their Yuanling. At this delicate moment, the 6 celestial emperors had decisively chosen other paths. Of course, the 6 celestial emperors couldn't be blamed for this, but Daozu would never forgive them. Zimei Daozu looked at the celestial emperors with a stern expression and sneered in a low voice. What, all of you want to seize this Khanate spirit? I might as well tell you that this Khanate spirit contains a great opportunity that is truly immortal and invincible, but why don't you take a look at it? Do you think you're worthy of having it? Before his voice could fade away, 18 extremely powerful streams of spiritual pressure fell straight down from the sky. At the same time, 18 Dao-fusing saints from the heaven beyond heaven broke through the Daoyu-ocean barrier and came over the crowd. Great Horn stared fixedly at the thin beam of light above Daozu's head and growled rudely, "They are not worthy." "What about you, Lao Tzu? Damn it, how can you have such a heaven-defying thing?" The eyes of the 18 Dao-fusing experts were filled with greed. There was a subtle change in their expressions. It was an opportunity that could allow Dao-fusing experts to go one step further, transcend Pangu world, transcend all shackles, and truly reach the realm of immortality and invincibility. Without it, even if one's cultivation base was 10,000 times, or even 1,000,000 times stronger than that of a Dao-fusing expert, one would always have to face the threat of the end, represented by the world breaker, and one's soul would always be in danger of being completely annihilated. But with this Khanate spirit, as long as one could comprehend it, fuse with it, and turn all its power into one's own, one would truly transcend the mortal world and become fearless. Even if the sky and earth were turned upside down and the entire boundless void was shattered to pieces, one would still not face the risk of dying. 9 old ox noses, hand over the spirit obediently. Yao Ling, one of the 18 saints, sighed softly and said slowly, "There are 18 of us here, and only 9 of you. If we really fight, none of you will be a match for us." Zimei Daozu raised his brows. Looking at the 18 saints, he sneered and said, "Yes, there are 18 of you, but there is only one Khanate spirit here. Now that you have obtained it, who should it belong to?" The 18 saints fell silent at the same time. They had been friends for countless years, but in the face of this great opportunity that could make one transcend the mortal world and become a saint, all of them fell silent. Zimei Daozu's words were sharp. Who should this Khanate spirit belong to? After a long silence, Great Horn slowly took a step back and said in a deep voice, "Lao Tzu swears here that we will work together to get this treasure. Lao Tzu doesn't want it. No matter who gets it, you must swear to protect me for the rest of my life. Even if it is an opportunity to transcend the mortal world and become a saint, Lao Tzu doesn't want it." Chi-Chi's expression flickered. The other 17 saints exchanged a glance, then burst out laughing and said, "Great Horns is right. Let's join hands and snatch it first, then draw lots to see who is lucky." Zimei Daozu's face turned a little purple. He never dreamed that the friendship between the 18 saints was so deep. At this delicate juncture, 7 furious roars towered into the sky, and countless living beings in Pangu world were frightened out of their wits by them. Then, The 7 Buddhist patriarchs cried out in unison, "Damn it! Who has taken away our opportunity to prove the Tao? Heavens above, which damned thief is it?" The atmosphere in the palace of Tao Origin changed as the 12 world breakers attacked the 9 Daozu at the same time.